We went through an all-day training and thought this could be beneficial to our faculty and staff here at Texas Tech as we start to develop more SBIR, STTR proposals. So Jim Greenwood is a team with his wife, Gail. He's been involved in the SBIR program since its inception in 1983. He's taught SBIR, STTR workshops in 48 states and includes Puerto Rico. This training has been offered through local and regional economic development groups, as well as universities, federal labs such as Sandia, Los Alamos, Brookhaven, Oak Ridge, and others. The Greenwoods have taught many of the national SBIR conferences over the past 18 years, including the most recent ones in Boston and DC. He's presented proposal preparation workshops at the 2016 National Institute of Health National SBIR Conference, as well as the Department of Defense's 2017 and 18 Beyond Phase 2 conferences. They are recipients, him and his wife, of the coveted Tibet's Award based on their contributions to SBIR, STTR outreach and education efforts, and were recognized as the Small Business Technology Council as champions for small businesses for their outreach efforts during the latest SBIR, STTR programs reauthorization effort. The Greenwoods also provide applicants with critiques of draft proposals before they're finalized and submitted for funding. They've performed over 1,100 reviews over the past decade and have always been able to offer suggestions that have made proposals stronger contenders for SBIR, STTR funding. Jim has served as a commercialization reviewer for the SBIR and STTR programs at the National Science Foundation, reviewing both Phase 1 and Phase 2 proposals, as well as proposals for NSF's supplemental programs such as Phase 1B and Phase 2B. The Greenwoods have also served on the U.S. Army's review panel that makes quality awards for the Army SBIR, STTR projects with the greatest commercial potential. So as you can see, they have extensive experience and have been around since the inception. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jim Greenwood. Jim, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. Morning, everybody. That's enthusiastic for Monday, but I understand where you're coming from. So, yeah, I'm glad everyone had a good weekend. Did anyone watch any football? Was there any football?
I did.
So you guys have a team, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Did you win?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think I saw a 1-point victory there. That's pretty exciting stuff there. So, wow. And you guys are pretty famous for that quarterback that you put into the NFL, Johnny Manziel. Is that right? Okay. Oh no, I apologize. I know it's Patrick Mohans or something like that, isn't it? So, yeah. Okay.
We are going to hang up just so you know.
Okay. All right. Just making sure everybody's awake, trying to get a little adrenaline flowing there. So, actually, Patrick is one of my my all-time favorite NFL players. So I really appreciate you guys grooming him and getting him out into the NFL, so the rest of the country can really enjoy his talent and his enthusiasm. I really like him all the way around. So I'm not sure I like him in the State Farm commercials, though. That's maybe not his best side, but at least where he's squirting the ketchup. He's pretty good where he's doing the cornhole thing, but not so much with the ketchup. So, well, with that aside, our discussion today is going to be on SBIR, STTR. Our webinar today, overview of these programs. So if you're new to SBIR, STTR, don't worry about it. We're going to bring you up to speed on what they are and how they differ from one another. And then we're going to jump into proposal preparation process, a little bit about how you'd go about preparing one of these proposals. It is abbreviated because we're down to about 3 hours on this session versus We have a full day version. In fact, I have a version of this workshop that's about a day and a half. So we're definitely going to be abbreviated. A couple of things Kim mentioned, we're going to take breaks. I have learned from doing a lot of webinars in recent months that it helps if we go for about 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and then take about a 10-minute break and then come back and do another 50 and take another 10-minute break. And then we'll do the home stretch to the end of the webinar then. So if you need to get up, stretch, return some calls, emails, texts, whatever you need to do, just realize we'll take a break here about 45 minutes from now and give you a chance to do that. Also, I want to encourage you, if you have not done so before, learn how to use the chat function on the Zoom system here. And if you do know how to do it, then you have an opportunity to vote for one of 4 agencies. Now, the vote here is we only have time in our 3-hour webinar to cover the instructions, the annotated instructions for one of these 4 agencies: Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, or Department of Energy. So if you have a preference for one of those agencies over the others, use the chat function and express your preference. I would prefer you'd only vote one time, but Taisha will be tracking kind of how people are voting on that. And you can vote anytime here this first hour, and we'll tally the results and then cover that set of instructions during the webinar. Now, we have all 4 sets of instructions in your materials. So even if we don't cover the agency that you prefer, you do have the materials to look at your leisure afterwards. Let's start out with a real simple definition of what this SBIR thing is. SBIR is the Small Business Innovation Research Program. It provides over $3 billion a year, non-recourse contracts and grants to small U.S.-owned companies to develop new products and services based on innovative, unproven concepts and technologies. A very dense definition, so let's pick it apart. Over $3 billion a year, it's about 3.6, 3.7 billion right now. Tells you that by small business standards, it's a substantial sum of money. Now, I recognize when national government, federal government's running trillion-dollar deficits, it doesn't sound like much, but for those of us that are in small business, this is the biggest source of funding for small businesses in terms of R&D and product development in the federal government. Non-recourse contracts and grants, non-recourse simply means you don't repay it, you don't give up equity. So 2 reasons you ought to like SBIR: you don't repay it, you don't give up equity. It's the closest thing to free money you'll ever get from the federal government for your business. Contracts and grants, most people refer to SBIR as a grant program. They're actually less than half right. Most of these awards are actually contracts. You go, what do I care? All I want is money. Well, it turns out contracts and grants are quite different. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. You got to be a small U.S.-owned company, right? Small. Simple definition, guys: 500 or fewer employees. So if you have 500 or fewer employees, you qualify as small for this program. U.S.-owned simply means a majority of the company is owned by U.S. citizens or permanent resident aliens. So we can have up to 49% foreign ownership, and that is allowed, but the majority, 51% or more, must be by U.S. citizens, permanent resident aliens. Purpose of SBIR is to develop new products and services. You go, I don't know everything about SBIR, but I sure know it's about R&D. It's not about products and services. Well, you're confusing the ends and the means of SBIR. The end point of a successful SBIR is to develop new products and services. Do something quote unquote useful with this money. Might be selling to consumers, might be selling to industry, might be selling to the federal government, state government, but selling to somebody. That is the outcome of a successful SBIR project, is selling products and services to somebody. Now, to develop those new products and services, and by the way, some agencies will accept existing improvements to existing products and services, not all, but some will accept that. You have to go through some R&D, and that R&D needs to be innovative and it needs to be regarding unproven concepts. What do they mean by innovative? Well, it's right there in the name of the program, right? Small Business Innovation Research Program. 11 different agencies participating. You probably get at least 11 different definitions of what is innovative. Some are very simple, straightforward. It's different, it's unique. Others, like the National Science Foundation or National Institutes of Health, give you more elaborate definitions of innovative. Realize it's an important consideration, though, that as Kim said, I review for National Science Foundation, and a number of our review panels have had extensive discussion about, is this really an innovative project or not? Unproven is the other part of that last bullet, very important, because I see people messing up on this all the time. Unproven means you are to propose something that you don't know whether it's going to work or not. Think about that for a minute. Right? If you write proposals, typical proposal you write says what? We know how to do it. We're experts. This is our field. We know everything about this. We know it's going to work. We've done this before. We've done it for other clients. We could do it for you. That's your typical proposal. This is not your typical proposal, because it's going to say, dang, we don't know whether it's going to work or not. Now, let's be clear. It's not because you're inept, unqualified, incompetent, or any of those negative things. Unproven means it may not work because it is so innovative, so different, so unique, so outside the box that it might not work. So you need to be looking for a project that's going to be around a unproven concept or technology that will ultimately, if you prove that it works, lead to the development of products and services. So that's in a nutshell, the SBIR program. So if that's SBIR, what the heck is STTR program? Well, there's a lot of differences, but here's a very basic one. While SBIR allows you as a small business to subcontract some of the money to someone else, including universities, SBIR allows it, STTR requires it. STTR says you must subcontract at least 30% of the research to a university, federal lab, or other nonprofit. So again, lots of differences, but make that the basic one. If you're going to do STTR, then you have to subcontract to a nonprofit like a university or federal lab. Whereas in SBIR, you can do it, but you don't have to. Now, our note down there, we've got 11 agencies, which I'll show you in a minute, are in SBIR. Only 5 of those agencies, however, have STTR programs. Turns out to be a size question. Only the largest SBIR agencies also have STTR agencies. Eligibility, we talked about 500 or fewer employees, 51% of US owned. It's got to be for profit. So we cannot be a nonprofit, a 501c3, for example, organization. You got to be a for-profit small business. Don't have to be profitable, thank goodness, but you got to at least be trying, organized for profit. And you got to have somebody who you can designate on the project as being primarily employed during your company, with your company during the SBIR STTR project. What does primary employment mean? It means basically that they're working 49% or less of their time somewhere else during this project. Not necessarily when you're writing the proposal, not necessarily when you're submitting the proposal, but when the contractor grant is awarded, then you have to be working, or this individual has to be working 49% or less time somewhere else. This person also must be technically qualified to lead the project. So this becomes our principal investigator. That's the title they will be given, and they've got to have on paper the qualifications to at least lead the project. Not necessarily do all the work, but at least lead the project. Now, interestingly, under STTR, this individual, this principal investigator, can actually be at the university rather than at our small business, and we can talk more about that if someone is interested in that opportunity within STTR. And again, universities can be subcontractors, but they cannot receive SBIR or STTR awards. It's a small business innovation research, small business technology transfer programs. What can we subcontract? SBIR, you can sub about 1/3 of the project. During the initial phase, we'll talk about the multiple phases here in a moment. That goes up to a 50% of the project, sub up to 50% of the project in the phase 2. You can sub to pretty much anybody or anything. You might find yourself subbing to a large prime contractor, as I will show you here in a minute. You might be subcontracting to a retired faculty member down the street who has a little consulting business. You can pretty much subcontract to anybody or anything on SBIR. As TTR, as we said, you got to subcontract some of the money, and that subcontract has to be to a nonprofit located within the United States. And as you can see there, the limits are, you got to sub at least 30%, and you can sub actually as much as 60% to that nonprofit. This is what I mean by subbing to large industry. Perhaps you've heard of this company, Lockheed Martin. Yeah, Lockheed Martin basically is saying, we are interested in teaming with small companies. And this is a email they put out this past funding cycle that the Department of Defense had, saying, hey, here are some topics in the DoD solicitation that we're interested in. We would be interested in being on your team, or at least put in a letter of interest with your proposal. And similar to that, this is Raytheon, another large prime contractor, saying the same thing. So I want you to realize that you can subcontract, and you shouldn't shy away from looking at subcontracting to very large industry if that makes sense on the project. Now you might say, when would that possibly make sense? Let me give you an example, recent example from my work. I had a young client, and of course, when you're my age, almost everybody's young, but this guy was 24, fresh out of school, and he had an idea for an innovative sensor that would go on NASA's rockets. So he was proposing to develop a new sensor and stick it on NASA's rockets. Now, you're NASA. 24-year-old comes to you and says, I want to stick sensors on your rockets. What do you say? Get away from my missile, kid. Don't touch the missile, right? Because you're young, you probably don't know what you're doing. These are really valuable, expensive missiles. Don't get near my missile. Well, a young client realized that he had an issue because he was so young and inexperienced. So what did he do? He went out and got a prime contractor, large prime contractor, to be his subcontractor. Now, what did that do? First of all, it added credibility to his team, because now it was not just a 24-year-old with an idea for sensor. It was a team that just happened to be led by a 24-year-old that included a large prime contractor that knows an awful lot about sensors and NASA's missiles. Also valuable, that subcontractor had prototypes of NASA missiles available. So our young engineer could demonstrate that his sensors worked on these prototypes, and they were just prototypes at the company. They weren't the real missiles at NASA. So NASA was not risking having a kid near their missiles and something going wrong. So I thought he did a great job. I was very impressed with the young man for kind of anticipating this problem, finding a good solution. The good solution ended up being teaming with a large prime contractor, and he was awarded the SBIR project by NASA. We mentioned phase 1, phase 2. What are these phases? There are actually 3 phases to SBIR STTR projects. Phase 1 is basically where you take that unproven idea that we talked about a while ago, your unproven concept, something you don't know whether it's going to work or not, take that and prove it works. So the government gives you a little bit of money, and we're showing there anywhere from about $25,000 to $257,000, and a little bit of time, less than a year. Prove it works. Prove that it does the what you think it'll do. Prove it solves the problem. Prove it's better than competing solutions. And the buzzword here is feasibility. Prove the feasibility of your idea. Now, some of you in phase 1 will prove your idea doesn't work. It'll be proven that it was a great idea, it was very interesting, but it doesn't work, or doesn't work as well as competing solutions. That's okay. That's actually not considered a failure in the program. That's considered what the program is supposed to do, is to ferret out those projects that will work versus those that are infeasible. If you prove your idea doesn't work in phase one, you're done. The project ends at that time. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, because that'd be the end of the project. If it does work, it does prove feasible, you can then apply for and hopefully receive a phase two. And as shown there, phase two is kind of the main R&D activity. It's doing a lot of the things you would love to have done in phase one, but didn't have the time in 3 to 12 months or the money, less than $250,000 to do the work. Notice the phase two budget much, much larger, more like 1.7 million, and much more time, up to 2 years. Now, again, that varies by agency. Some agencies are smaller than that on phase twos, but the point is phase twos are a lot more money and a lot more time than phase ones. Phase three then is meeting that goal of doing something useful with this research and pushing it into the marketplace as a product or service to be used by the warfighter, to be used by the astronaut, to be used by the industry representative, to be used by consumers. No SBIR, STTR money at that phase. That's where you have to turn to the private sector. Maybe your own funds, maybe what's the 3 F's, friends, families, and fools, sources of funding. Maybe it's the vulture capitalist, maybe it's the angel investor. Point is, you don't use SBIR money in phase three. That's not a purpose of SBIR money. Now notice I have got down there though, non-SBIR federal funding. Remember our example I was giving you of the young man coming up with a new sensor for NASA. He does phase one, proves that it works. Phase two, he perfects the prototype. Phase three, who do you think is going to pay for phase three? The customer is NASA, so who's going to pay for phase three? NASA. NASA is going to give him non-SBIR funding to finalize any development that needs to be done on the sensor. And then he will receive a contract, hopefully by NASA, to start deploying sensors on their rockets. So phase three would be paid for by NASA, but it's not NASA SBIR funds, it's regular NASA procurement dollars. So those are the 3 phases. As Kim indicated, there's some variations on it. So NSF has a phase 1B and a phase 2B. NIH has a phase 2B. We have a number of other initiatives. The military has a number of enhancements to phase 2s. So this is the basic structure, but you'll see a lot of variations on it by different agencies. Contract versus grant agency. I mentioned earlier that some of them are contracts, some of them are grants. So what's the difference between an agency that gives you an SBIR as a contract versus one that gives you your SBIR or STTR as a grant? Contract agencies have a mission. They're having a problem accomplishing that mission, and they use SBIR to solve those problems. The military is the classic contract agency in SBIR. And the quote there from Susan over at DARPA within the military, I think sums it up nicely. Focus on what we ask for, not what you think we need. We, the military, will tell you, small company, what the problem is. You, small company, come up with an innovative solution to our problem. Don't tell us about other problems you think we ought to be working on. Don't tell us why you think we ought to be using some sort of different airplane than what we use. We'll tell you what the problem is with our airplane, you fix it. Okay, so contract agency is all about you grasping the problem and responding with an innovative solution to their problem. Okay, that's contract. So how is grant different from contract? Grant agencies say, look, we don't really have any mission except giving money for good ideas. Got any good ideas? You go, can you give me a little more guidance on that? Well, yeah, we're the National Institutes of Health. We fund any good ideas related to human health. Got any? Human health. Wow, that's a really narrow topic, isn't it? Yeah, think of all the things you could submit under a human health candidate agency. All sorts of different projects are going to be available to you at that point. National Science Foundation is the ultimate grant agency in that they basically say you don't have an idea that doesn't fit one of our 24 topics. We have 24 topics in the NSF SBIR STTR program, very broad topics, and 23 of them, you don't fit into those. You're always going to fit into number 24 because the 24th topic at NSF is other. So you're always going to fit NSF. But that's your main difference. Contract agencies, here's the problem, solve the problem. Can you solve the problem? Here's the problem. Boy, I sure wish you could solve our problem. We need this problem solved. Have you got a solution to our problem? It's all about their problem. The grant agency, what do you want to work on? What do you think needs to be solved? What do you think is a good idea? So very different kinds of agencies, both using SBIR, but using them in very different ways.
Hey, Jim, before you go over this next slide, can I jump in with some questions?
Sure.
We have a handful that have come up, and I think before you move too far off the topic, it'd be great to answer these. The first one is, what's the definition of a company as it relates to SBIR STTR?
Basically, it can be any legal form, so you can be partnership, LLC, LLP, S Corp, C Corp. You can be a sole proprietor, but it's frowned upon in part because that means you usually are using your social security number as an ID number. You have to disclose that number on your proposal and application, and there's just that concern among the agencies that you will be risking some sort of identity theft.
Great. The next question is, does technical qualification mean advanced degree, or can there be other factors that would be included?
Interesting question, and based on this slide versus contract versus grant agencies, contract agencies are more accepting of experience as opposed to necessarily academic credentials. Grant agencies tend to still want to see pretty strong academic credentials. You don't have to have a PhD for your principal investigator, but for the grant agencies, I think it's a real good idea to have a PhD on your team.
Great. Next question. How can we find organizations already getting STTR and SBIR funds to subcontract with if we want to start learning more from the inside while becoming a prime ourselves?
Okay, good question. Go to the official government website for SBIR, and it's simply sbir.gov. And on there, you'll be able to search for what awards have been made in recent years. And with that should be information about the awarding, the company that received the award, the awarding agency, and at least some of them will have subcontractors listed, so you'll have an idea of who is a sub. Other than that, you can look at the individual agencies if there's one particular agency you're interested in, but the database at sbir.gov will be across all agencies.
All right. Next question. Would it be possible to get these slides? Oh, yep. I already told them that we could get them the slides, so that's not a problem.
Okay.
It said, this is from Austin. This question is, can you do this multiple times? Let's say you develop a new manufacturing technology, then want to go to an engine technology. Could you do this again?
Yes, you can. A couple of answers to that. One is you can go back and get multiple awards for different projects. So you can go in and get one part of the project, software part of the project, funded by one SBIR. You could go in and get another part, maybe a hardware part of the project funded with STTR. Maybe there's a particular application needed by the military that could be done, adapting it to a particular application under a separate SBIR STTR. Related question to that would be, can I submit the same proposal multiple places? And the short answer is yes. You want to always disclose to the agencies if you're doing that. They'll ask you if you are sending a similar related proposal somewhere. You always want to disclose that. But it is generally allowed and could be a good idea because it gives you multiple chances of getting funded.
Great. This will be the last question for now.
Okay.
This is from Phil. if they go to a phase 3 after NSF SBIR phase 2, could they get other funding from the NSF that's non-SBIR? I would assume the answer is yes to that, but did I ask that properly, Phil?
Yes, looking at like for that phase 3 non-SBIR funding, could it still come from the same agency that the SBIR was attached to?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, short answer is yes. You probably won't see that happen very often in a place
Yeah.
like NSF.
Right.
It certainly will happen at places like the military, NASA, and in general, the contract agencies, the ones that want to use the project themselves for their internal work. But without getting too deep into the woods here, some of the grant agencies, and NSF would be a prime one. It's basically they don't work with small business unless it's through SBI or STTR. They have no other programs for small business except something like I-Corps, but no other research funding programs. And their feeling is if you're a small company, that's where you ought to get your money from NSF is through SBI or STTR.
Great. That's all the
Okay.
questions for now.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
Mhm.
So if you're wondering who are the contract agencies, who are the grant agencies, this slide will help there. If it's in blue, it's a contract agency. If it's green, it's grants. Just looking at the pie chart there on the left side, you can see that DoD is the 800-pound gorilla in this program. DoD is almost half of the program by themselves. Hundreds of topics a year. As you can see on the chart on the right side, approaching this year will be, the next fiscal year will be approaching $2 billion in funding just themselves in SBIR STTR. So lesson to be learned, unless you just don't want to work with the military for whatever reason, don't rule them out in terms of your project. They are so large with so many topics and have such diverse interests that you may find that a project you're interested in could be funded for the military to meet their needs and then be adapted to perhaps a civilian purpose if that's a market you want to pursue. So DoD is the big player. Department of Health Human Services, or as I will refer to it in this webinar, National Institutes of Health, is the next largest. You can see their slice. They're kind of the 600-pound gorilla here. Followed by Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, and NASA. Those 5 agencies are the big 5, have 95% of the SBIR money, and they have 100% of the STTR money, meaning the other 6 agencies do not participate in STTR. Now, who are the other 6 agencies? Well, if you look at the pie chart, see those really thin slices up there? You know, kind of looks like that piece of cheesecake you get at the fancy restaurant with, you know, a couple of strawberries propping it up. That's the small agencies, agency slices up there. And the names of those agencies are listed on the right side. Agriculture, Homeland Security, Commerce, Transportation, Education, and EPA. And you can see the dollar amounts, why they're considered the small agencies. Little EPA down there, about $4 million, again, in contrast to the Department of Defense at $1.75 billion. So 11 agencies dominated by one agency, DoD, and almost exclusively all the money's in 5 agencies, DoD, NIH, DOE, NSF, and NASA, but you do have 6 other agencies that participate, putting out, for example, Department of Agriculture, maybe a couple of awards per state per year on average. Okay. Again, I'll remind you, if you have one of the agencies, and it's basically the 4 largest ones in this slide, DoD, NIH, DOE, and NSF, have one of those that you prefer to see when we go through the instructions, please vote under the chat function, let us know. When do the agencies want your proposal? It's all over the calendar. Every agency has a different release date, which means that's when you know their topics, you know what their instructions are, you know what you got to do to submit your proposal, and they all have different close dates, which is when your proposal is due. So if we just kind of look on the Left side, look kind of the fall time frame. Let's kind of November, December. Who could we be considering? We've got NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Energy ARPA, National Institutes of Health, Homeland Security, NASA, and NSF could all be candidates for us to be submitting proposals this fall. So this is actually a pretty good time to be looking at SBIR with a lot of different agencies participating. NASA just released their solicitation this past week with a due date there of January 8th. And notice NASA once a year. So you either submit between now and January 8th or you got to sit out till next fall. Just below them though, NSF 4 times per year, 4 different solicitation cycles. Department of Defense 3 per year, National Institutes of Health 3 per year, Department of Energy twice per year. So NASA is the only one of the large agencies that doesn't have multiple opportunities per year. I'm not saying if that's right or wrong, I'm just telling you that's how they do it. Text box there towards the top, Department of Defense, we're seeing more and more what they're calling out of cycle solicitations. So yes, they've got 3 solicitations per year, but more and more individual components of the military are coming out with a request for proposals whenever they feel like it. They just pop one out with a due date 60 days later. DARPA has a one proposal per year, or excuse me, 1 solicitation per year, but then puts out multiple topics during the course of the year that you can respond to. So each agency doing it differently. And you're sitting there going, why don't all these stupid agencies just all do it the same and make my life easier? Because each of these agencies is an independent agency and they see SBIR, STTR as part of their offering. So USDA has all sorts of loan programs and grant programs for universities, and just happens to also have an SBIR program. Well, the SBIR program is designed to fit in to all the other things they do. It's not necessarily designed to fit in with other agencies' SBIR programs. Similar slide, but for STTR. Highlighted a few of the most recent changes and dates up there. Defense was delayed in the submission this last go around, delayed because of some technical issues. So again, primary difference, SBIR, STTR, you're gonna have to have that nonprofit, the university or federal lab involved in your STTR. It's okay to have them involved in your SBIR, but not necessary. Look at the crystal ball for a minute. What might be coming down the pike? Might be some reduction in the number of audits or the severity of audits of SBIR projects, at least at the military. This is again getting a little bit deep, but there are opportunities to sell your results of your SBIR STTR project back to the federal government in phase 3. We mentioned our friend designing the sensors for NASA's rockets. This would be what he would be doing. He would be selling back to NASA in phase 3. Well, it turns out you can get a very nice benefit when you do that called a sole source procurement, where basically you have no competition when you submit that phase 3 proposal. And what this says is GSA, which is a federal agency, is willing to write those contracts when sometimes the agencies themselves are unable or unwilling to. There are a couple of things that existed for a while, one called direct to phase 2. This is an opportunity to skip phase 1, go straight to a phase 2. It existed at the military and NIH in the past, then it went away. Now it's come back again at NIH and at the military. And 3% admin tax means some of the SBIR money is being withheld from you as applicants. The agencies are holding that money for administrative purposes. There's been some discussion that DoD would like to make SBIR, STTR permanent programs. The issue here is that these are temporary programs and have to be reauthorized or renewed every few years by Congress. And DoD has really embraced SBIR STTR over the years and has made noises about just making their SBIR STTR programs permanent, not having to go through the reauthorization process. The good news would be that makes the largest single agency in the federal government a permanent sending out of SBIR STTR proposals, requests for proposals, and accepting and awarding them. The downside is every time one of these reauthorizations comes up, DoD drags the other 10 agencies kicking and screaming through the reauthorization process because DoD wants it reauthorized. Well, there are some agencies that, just to be blunt, they would be happy if SBIR STTR went away. NSF would be a candidate for that. NIH is probably a candidate. Probably USDA feels that way. There are others, but those would be three right off the top of my head that would definitely like to see SBIR go away. It's mandated by law, by Congress through law. And if the law went away, they'd be happy to drop SBIR. Well, DoD, if they made their program permanent, they wouldn't have to go through the reauthorization. They wouldn't drag the other 10 agencies. And I think that means in fairly short order, SBIR STTR would disappear, except at DoD, it would become a military-only program. Also, some feeling that the DoD SBIR program may double in size, even bigger than it already is for a number of reasons. And again, increasing the set aside for SBIR right now, SBIR and STTR are percentages of the agency's R&D budgets, extramural R&D budgets, and there's been some noise about increasing that set aside. So just some things that may be coming down the pike here in the future. Success rates, the point here is you submit this proposal, it is not a cakewalk. It is not a just wait for the award to be made and the check to be sent to you. It is like a 1 in 5 chance of your phase 1 getting awarded. So if you look at the second set of bars from the left for phase 1, the blue bar being SBIR, red bar being STTR. This was National Institutes of Health back in 2018, and it's about a 1 in 5 chance of success. So put it another way, you may have to submit several proposals before one gets awarded, a phase 1 gets awarded. Now look at the third set of bars from the left for phase 2. Notice how much higher they are. So once you get a phase 1, get your foot in the door with a phase 1, if you do a good job and you prove it's feasible, your idea is feasible, then your chances of getting a phase 2 are much higher than it was getting a phase 1. Much higher probability of success. And remember, phase 2s are $1 million plus projects versus phase 1s that might be $100,000, $200,000. This is why when you get a phase 1, when you get done celebrating, get the project done and be already, while you're working on the phase 1, already marketing for the phase 2, already starting to work on your phase 2 proposal, because that's the path of success, is to jump from phase 1 to phase 2, then ultimately to 3. All right, so that's maybe a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but my intention was to try to give you some background before we started looking at jumping into the process for developing a proposal. Kim, do we have more questions that we might want to address before we do that?
Yep, we sure do. Thanks
Okay.
for that. This one is from Phil, and his question, it's multi-pronged here, so hold on to your hat. Does a DoD submission have to address a DoD concern, or is it up to them to make the translation to a military application? Or does an application to the DoD need to reflect the military concern?
99.99% of the time, the military will say, here's the problem, can you solve the problem? And you need to say, here's how we're going to solve your problem, and translate what you're going to do into solving their problem. Okay. Now that 0.0 1% is going to be something we'll talk about here in a little bit, which is an initiative that's being championed by Air Force, they call it AFWorks. It's different names, different components, but they're doing a different take on that, and we'll talk about that in the next section. But again, 99.9% of the time, we're talking you just address and tell them how you're going to solve their problem.
So is there, just a follow on that, NSF has 24 topics. Does DoD have also a list somewhere and a number of topics that you can find online?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. There'll be each time they put out their solicitation, there'll be a set of topics.
Okay, great. This question is from Brian. If either avenue is possible, are the odds of receiving funding higher from SBIR or STTR?
Good question, and the answer has varied from solicitation to solicitation, solicitation cycle to solicitation cycle. One solicitation cycle, NIH, National Institutes of Health, was awarding 75% of STTRs, phase ones. That's how few proposals they were receiving. Today, I don't see that difference. And in fact, when we did this slide, notice SBIR STTR phase ones, 18.4 versus 20.9, really very little difference between the two. And phase two, it was actually lower on STTR than it was on SBIR for phase twos. So I don't see any pattern at all, any consistent pattern. Now, something we're going to talk about, and this is, notice step number 2 up here, talk with the agency reps. We're going to recommend that. And that's one time you may find out that there's a topic that's starving for proposals. And that's an opportunity to say, wow, there's not many people applying on this one. Maybe I've got a better shot at it. That's a better game, I think, than trying to outguess that SBIR is going to be a higher probability of success than STTR.
All right, the next question is from Tim, and it says, would contact with the SBIR STTR program officer prior to submission be a good idea to help guide? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Absolutely, and if they will allow it, and we'll talk more about that in this in our discussion here about talking with the agency reps. Most agencies, you can talk to them at some point in the process. A notable exception is our friends at NASA, who, when they came out, what was that, last Monday, when they came out with their solicitation and you finally saw their topics, you know what they're interested in, they refused to talk to you. They say it would not be fair to anyone else that they don't talk to. Dumbest thing in the world, in my opinion, because if you've got the initiative to call them and talk to them, then you deserve to gain information that somebody who's lazy and not willing to make the effort isn't going to gain. But that's not how they see it, and their attitude is, as soon as we put out our topics, it wouldn't be fair to talk to any of you. We won't talk to you. But virtually all the other big agencies, I won't say that's true of the smaller agencies, but the big agencies we're talking about, military, NIH, DOE, NSF, they're all going to allow you to talk to them at some point in the process.
Excellent. Okay, I think this is the last question for now. Hassan, are DoD funds exclusively contracts, or do they do occasional grants?
DoD, they are all contracts. Now, again, when I show you what the military, particularly AFWorks at the Air Force has done, it's sure going to look like a grant, but they're all contracts. So occasionally the military has grant programs. I know people have gotten grants with the military. They're not SBIRs though. SBIRs are always going to be contracts.
Okay, that's it for now.
All right. Well, it looks like I've got 9:53. This looks like a good point in our presentation for a break, and we're about 50 minutes in. So let's take a 10-minute break. Again, we got 9:53, so let's come back at 10:03, and we'll jump into our process for developing an SBIR proposal.
All right, see you soon.
Okay.
Jim, we have another question that popped up, but if you'd like to respond before we
Sure.
get started.
Okay.
This is from Tim. Is there a conference for the NSF, DOD, NIH, SBIR, STTR programs where you can meet with the program officers and awardees?
Funny you should mention that. There actually will be a conference starting tomorrow. It's the twice annual national conference. I'm trying to think, they label it though. It's not a national conference. It's a summit, I believe they're calling it this year. That same website that I mentioned earlier, SBIR.gov, should have a calendar of events. It should be on that calendar of events. I'm since SBA is sponsoring the conference, but I wouldn't, I don't know that for a fact. I've not seen it on there. So take a look there, Tim, and if you see it, there's probably still an opportunity to register, and if not, let me know and I'll find you a link to the site. Even though it's virtual this year, there are opportunities to have one-on-one sessions with representatives of the various agencies. I do not know who all of the agencies are participating. In the good old days, and like Kim said in the introduction, I've been involved in this since the get-go. We used to have all the agencies participate. Over the years, they've gotten a little more finicky about which things they want to participate in, and NIH will have its own conference, so it doesn't participate in the national conference and so on. But you should have the best opportunity to meet with a variety of agencies at a single gathering tomorrow through Thursday, I believe it is.
Also, as a side note, I believe the program officer for NSF wears two hats, one of which is SBIR, STTR, and the other is NSF I-Corps. And because we are a site and a node, we have access to him and have a relationship with him. So there might be a way to connect with him as well.
Good. All right. How's our voting going? Kim, have we gotten many people to vote for one agency versus the other?
Yeah,
I've taken a tally if that helps.
yeah,
Oh,
that would
okay.
be great, Tasha. What's the tally?
Yeah, so we've got 10 for NSF and we've got 3 for NIH.
Wow. And nobody for the military?
Nobody yet.
Wow. I am surprised. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, there's still more time to vote. So, and I wouldn't wouldn't sit back if I were interested in NSF just because you're in the lead. You never know. You might get overtaken by one of those other agencies. So please take that opportunity. And again, all the instructions for all 4 agencies are in your materials with my annotated comments throughout, but we will cover one of them as part of today's session based on your votes. Okay, so let's go through a 7-step process here for kind of developing a phase 1 proposal. First is to find a topic. Kind of makes sense, right? You got to find a topic. You can't just send in an unsolicited proposal. And some people think, well, the grant agencies are unsolicited because they say you can send in anything. Well, you can send in a proposal on any topic to NSF. You can send in a proposal on anything related to human health to National Institutes of Health, but it has to be sent in on a certain deadline, in a certain format, on certain forms, with certain content. So it's not a just send us your ideas whenever you feel like it. It's a very formalized process, even though the topics may be very broad in some of those agencies. Where do you find the topics? Topics are in, and I've been using the term already this morning, a solicitation. It's basically what normal people would call a request for proposals, but no, they call it a solicitation. And actually they call it other things. DOE and NIH like to call it funding opportunities announcement, or FOA. The military likes BA, I guess they like sheet. It's a BA, broad agency announcement. USDA likes request for applications, RFA. My personal favorite is NOAA and their NOFO. Have you seen our NOFO? We got a really good NOFO this year, Notice of Funding Opportunity. You go, how am I supposed to remember all this stuff? If you'll just remember the word solicitation, They all understand that. They know what you mean when you say solicitation. So use that term. Where do you find these things? You got to find it on the websites now. In the old days, believe it or not, they actually mailed these things out to you. But now you got to go on the website. So there's that SBIR.gov official government website. You can link there. Or frankly, I think it's easier to go to our website, go to the SBIR page, scroll to the bottom, and they're all listed there at the bottom of the page. That'll just get you to the SBIR website for each agency. You still got to hunt around for the solicitation. They, for whatever reason, don't make it all that obvious where the solicitation is. So figure you'll take a little time to kind of dig around for that. There are search engines, couple search engines that you can use. And you go, well, why do I need a search engine? I'm interested in human health, and everybody knows human health is where you go with NIH. Well, take a look at the meatball chart here to suggest that maybe you don't know where all the topics are going to be that might be of interest to you. You're interested in human health, that falls under life sciences. That's the last column there to the right. And sure enough, NIH, if you come across, NIH is shown with a meatball, so they have life science topics. You are correct. But look at what other agencies have life science topics. Every agency has life science topics. And that's something you got to learn in SBIRSTTR is you'll find topics in places you don't expect it. Boy, the military, life sciences, you bet. Why? Because there's something called war. And war causes a need for being concerned about life sciences. Diagnosing problems before someone is allowed into combat, taking care of someone who is injured in combat, evacuating them from combat, emergency medicine once they receive an injury. What about more long-term care? What about rehabilitation? What about things like PTSD? What about taking care of veterans when they get elderly? You get the hint that there's a little bit of life sciences involved at DoD. A lot of life sciences, a lot of medical topics, and you go, oh, it's just that mundane contract stuff. Well, DARPA a few years ago had a topic that I don't think was very mundane. It was called, do you know how to maybe regrow a limb, a human limb? You know, if someone loses a limb in combat, is there a way to regrow the limb? I think that's pretty state of the art, pretty far out there, innovative ideas. Energy, same thing. Almost all the agencies have energy topics. People think Department of Energy is where I submit an energy topic. No, look at any of the agencies. Environment and Natural Resources and the other categories shown up here. So use the search engines to find the opportunities that you don't necessarily know where they're going to be in terms of the agency. So SBIR.gov, again, the official SBIR website for the federal government. Click on the funding tab, it pulls down, and what you've got are topics, open, future, and close. Click on open, and it basically says towards the top of this page, you just get a box and it says, what do you want to search for? So I typed in that day nuclear. I just interested how many topics there might be out there with nuclear in them. So I typed nuclear, I hit search, 4 hits. Wow, you know, it's not a lot, but at least it was something. But it's in NIH, Department of Health and Human Services. Well, that wasn't what I was thinking. I was thinking, you know, like nuclear energy, nuclear weapons. Now it's showing up here, and you're not clear at this point. Is it some sort of radiation medicine, nuclear medicine, or is it some sort of damage, physical disease caused by, or physical damage caused by radiation? We don't know. We could click on this topic and actually see its full content. Interesting over here where it's kind of telling you how many nuclear topics you're going to get by agency. There were none at Department of Defense. And I was surprised because I knew at that point in time that DoD was requesting proposals, and was just really surprised that none of them would have the term nuclear in them. You can do a closed search of the topics that were out there previously. And here we get almost 550 hits. And notice over here on the far left side again, Department of Defense, 186 were in DoD. So as expected, there were a lot of nuclear topics in DoD in the past. So what's the biggest problem with this search engine? Well, on the date that I did the nuclear search, it basically said there were only 3 agencies that had topics out there: DOE, National Institutes of Health, and a special DOE program called ARPA-E. But I knew for a fact that there were 3 other agencies that were also requesting proposals on that date, namely the military, the largest single agency, as we know from our pie chart, NSF, the 5th largest agency, and USDA. Why were those 3 other agencies not included in the search engine at SBIR.gov? And the short answer is because they don't have to be. Nobody can force DoD or NSF or USDA to put their topics into the official government search engine. This official government search engine and SBIR.gov is run by SBA, Small Business Administration, and they have no authority, ability, horsepower to force large agencies to participate. So the official search engine and the official SBIR.gov website are really hampered because they have no ability to force agencies to participate. So what are the options? Well, you can turn to a couple of other websites that have search engines. Actually, all competing SBIR-STTR agencies have search engines, but let's look at a couple of them that would be most beneficial, I think. One is for the military. This is DoD SBIR. And under the topic info pull down, and also found here on the side, you can find information about topics, and it basically is a search engine. It doesn't say so, but it's a search engine. So if we click on that, we get another box that looks very similar to what we saw under SBIR.gov. And again, you can put in a keyword. In this case, I put in the keyword missile and hit the search command, and it tells you everything that's out there. It says that there were 3 topics at that point in time related or having the term missile in them. And again, we can click on those and take a look at them if we want to. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, we can do more filters. So we can filter by component if you're only interested in SBIR versus STTR, or you're only interested in missile topics under SOCOM. You could do that if you wanted to, or a technology area, which is another pull down menu. And when you look at one of their topics from the DSIP search engine, the DoD search engine, this is what a typical one will look like. Notice it tells you kind of generally the project. It tells you kind of what they expect you to do in phase 1, what you expect you to do in phase 2, and what they expect you to come out with in phase 3. And then there's questions and answers at the bottom of the page. This is the bottom of that same slide where there are some people asking questions about the topic. This is kind of odd because at this point in time, you could actually call up the military and ask your questions. And instead, people were asking questions on this website. You go, well, there's no harm in asking questions on the website. Well, the problem is, when you ask a question on the website, the question and the military's answer is here for you and me and everybody to look at. So there is no ability for you to get insights into a topic that you can incorporate into your proposal that are insights that someone else doesn't have. Everyone else can put that into their proposal if they want to. So it's better, in my opinion, to not use this Q&A function until the government will not accept your questions about proposed topics ahead of time. Now, what the military does, and let's use the current or upcoming solicitation as an example. On the, I believe it's the 24th of November, DoD will put out its newest solicitation. So on the 24th of November, you go to the same website, this DSIP website, and you will see what are these solicitations. For the first 30 days, you can ask questions by calling up the TPOC, is what they're called, TPOC, or technical point of contact, on any one of the topics. You can ask questions. You can strike up an email conversation or a phone conversation, as we're going to recommend here shortly. After 30 days, then you go into a blackout period and the military will not talk to you. The only time, or the only way you can get questions answered then, is through this this online Q&A that we're showing on this slide. So there's a point in time that you use this if you have to, but you don't ask your questions online for everybody, including your fellow competitors, to see, in my opinion. Okay, so that's one search engine. You got SBIR.gov, you got the military search engine at their DSIP submission portal, then grants.gov. You may be familiar with grants.gov as a place where you submit proposals. Well, it's also somewhere where you search for grant opportunities. So you click on search grants and it takes you to this fairly elaborate screen that allows you to put in keywords and past and previous, forecasted, forward, grants, anything else that you can click into various boxes going down the page there and hit search, and it gives you, in this case, 4 hits. So I searched basically on, I wanted to see anything that was SBIR and had COVID included in it. So I was interested in what SBIR grant opportunities there were related to COVID. This suggests that there were 4 of them available out there. Now I can use, I get my 4, I can then click on any one of those and it takes me to, and unfortunately it doesn't take me to the document, it takes me to another screen. And this says, well, gee, yeah, USDA does have a phase 1 solicitation out there, and here's some information about it. And you have to click on related documents, which takes you down to another screen, which says, well, actually there are 2 documents related to that solicitation. And finally, you click on the screen, the second one down there, and that finally would get you to the solicitation. So grants.gov is a way to search for topics in the grant agencies of SBIRSTTR. Now, remember before from our pie chart, not all the agencies are grants, a lot of them are contracts. The contract topics are not going to be found in the grants.gov search engine. They'll be the grant agencies, but at least it will help you search through the grant agencies. So what you've got is basically a SBIRSTTR wide search engine that should allow you to search all 11 agencies in one place, but it doesn't do its job. It's not whatever you want to say. It's not qualified, it doesn't work, it's not maintained, whatever you want to say, it doesn't do the job. So you have to turn to these other opportunities. And I think you want to do the search engine at DoD because it's such a large agency. And I think you want to do the search engine at grants.gov because it at least searches across all of the various grant agencies that give their SBIRs as grants. And between, I would say, those 3 search engines, you should be able to find topics in probably 80% of the agencies and the opportunities. I'm guessing that percent, but it's a majority. It's not 100 by any means, but it's a majority anyway. All right, so find your topic. Once you find your topic, now you want to talk with the agency. Why would I want to talk to the agency? Well, you need to learn more about the topic than what's found in the solicitation. Solicitation will be a Monarch Notes version of the topic. It'll be an abbreviated version. It'll be a 1-pager description of what is probably a 10-page topic. So you need to learn more, and one way to do that is to talk with the agency. It's also, by talking to the agency, it's a great opportunity to get a feel for them. when you hang up the phone, is you're feeling, wow, what a great agency. I would love to work with them. They're really neat people. I'd learn a lot working with them. Or do you hang up the phone saying, what a bunch of buffoons. What a idiot. I cannot believe my taxpayer money pays for these people. Well, if it's the latter, why would you want to send a proposal to them and then have to work with them for the next several years? Your project. It's the agency opportunity, chance to get to know you a little bit before your proposal shows up. If I'm just sends if you talk with then she's made kind of an intro to be received. Any of those reasons have them. So you got a quote on there during the pre-release period, and that's this first 30 days I'm talking about with the military. During the pre-release period, proposing firms have an opportunity to contact topic authors. Keyword, opportunity. It is an opportunity to talk with them and to learn more about the topic. And the second quote, some of you may think with the grant agencies, you know, they accept proposal on anything. Why should I bother to talk to them? Well, just because they're willing to accept a proposal on any topic at NSF doesn't mean that they necessarily think every project is a good idea. Did I tell you about the prevention of genocide project? Yeah, it was very interesting. I was a reviewer on that for NSF. Prevention of genocide proposal, and this was back when drones were just starting to kind of come to the forefront. Prevention of genocide proposal was they were going to assign, the small company was going to assign a drone to every known bad person in the world. And it had a camera on it. And the drone would follow this bad person 24/7. And because the bad person knew they were being followed 24/7, they wouldn't kill anybody because they were being watched 24/7. Now I'm reading this proposal, reviewing this proposal for NSF, and my first thought is, you know, if I'm a really, really bad person, I'm probably already in management, right? I no longer actually kill people. I have other people who kill for me because I have to work, you know, I have to do shareholder relations, I have to do interviews, I have to work on payroll, I have to do my taxes. I don't have time to kill people. So fine, follow me with a drone. I don't care because I'm not killing people because I'm in management now. But by the way, if there is a drone following me and I am a bad person doing bad things, why don't I just shoot that thing out of the sky? Why don't I just knock that thing down and eliminate it so that it's not following me 24/7? So there's a proposal that was certainly within the 24 topics of NSF that's allowable, but was that a good idea? I think not. I don't think it got very far at NSF. So it'd be good to talk with the NSF program officer in advance and say, I'm thinking about this drone to follow bad people. What do you think? And let him or her kind of maybe try to talk you out of that. Who do you talk to? The SBIR office probably is not who you need to talk to at this point. You need to talk to people closer to the topic. So it's the program directors, it's program officers, it's topic managers. I mentioned TPOC being a term they use at the military for technical point of contact on a topic. Even potential users, someone that would actually use this technology of yours is a good one to talk to at the agency. When do you talk to them? Grant agency, you can talk to them anytime. The contract agencies have severe limitations on when you can talk to them. And most of the contract agencies will not allow you to talk to them about their topics when they have a solicitation out and requesting proposals. The exceptions being the military, which I've been telling you about the past few minutes, and Department of Homeland Security has a similar pre-release period that they will allow you to talk to their topic authors before they go into blackout. How do you do this conversation? I recommend you start it with an email, in part because a lot of times that's all they give you in the solicitation is the person's email. So you pretty much have to start with email. But even if they gave me a phone number, I would still start with an email because I think it's a more polite way to introduce yourself to the technical point of contact. Having initially emailed them, though, I would try to convince them to go to a phone conversation rather than an email for you to ask them your specific questions. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is people will say things that they won't write down, right? You know, you've ever been burned by something you wrote in an email, came back to haunt you? So you learned, right? You learned you don't put stuff in emails that will come back and haunt you. So people will say things on the phone and give you more detail and insights that they might not give you in an email. Second reason for going with the phone rather than email is, let's say the technical point of contact will give you 10 minutes of their time to answer your questions. Now, if it's 10 minutes on the phone, it's 10 minutes of them talking. If it's 10 minutes of them with email, it's 10 minutes of them typing. So what can you do faster, talk or type? Now, maybe one of you is a highly skilled keyboard expert, you were a typist extraordinaire in a previous life, maybe you could type faster. Most people can talk faster than they can type, meaning you can get more information from a technical point of contact at the agency, you get more information from them in 10 minutes if they're talking than if they're typing, particularly if they're two-finger hunting and pecking on their little smartphone. So you request a phone conversation with them. I recommend in your request, your email request, tell them you only want 10 minutes of their time. That helps them understand that you are respectful. You're not going to tie them up for a long period of time. You're going to be very concise with your questions. And then you ask a question, when you get that conversation set up, you ask a question, and then this is very important, guys, shut up so that they can answer the question, right? Because if you just ask a question, then ask another question, then ask another question, they can't answer it because you just keep talking. So ask a question, shut up, let them answer the question. Then ask another question, shut up, let them answer the question. You'd be amazed how much you can gain in 10 minutes if you got the right questions and if you'll ask it and then allow them to answer it. Two agencies don't say it's a good idea to talk to them before you submit a proposal. They say you must submit a pre-proposal communication or we won't even accept your proposal. One of those is Department of Energy, the other one's National Science Foundation. So Energy says you must submit what is called a letter of intent before a deadline that is on their website. It's already out there because they're already got the schedule set up. You have to submit your letter of intent, and if you don't do that, then you cannot submit a proposal. So you got to do a letter of intent. Now, again, this is only Department of Energy. Realize it's only DOE requires a letter of intent. No other agency requires that. But if you don't do that pre-proposal communication with DOE, then they will not accept your full proposal. National Science Foundation is the other one requiring pre-proposal communication. NSF requires what is called a project pitch. It's, if you will, an executive summary of your project. You submit this anytime you want to, and within 3 weeks, one of the program officers at NSF will respond. It's generally a paragraph unique to you, followed by a bunch of paragraphs that are boilerplate. And contained therein will be an invitation to submit your proposal or a response that you are not being invited to submit a proposal. And invited versus non-invited, exactly what it sounds like. If you are invited to submit a proposal, you now have the right, if you will, to submit a full proposal to NSF. If you're not invited, they will not accept your full proposal. You'll have to revise and resubmit the project pitch and try to, again, get an invitation. All right. So I understand your agencies and their differences before you call. No two agencies are alike. The military, it's not just that the military is different from other agencies. They're different even within themselves. And this is a fairly dated example now, but if you look at all the different components of the military down the left side, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc., and then look at what they will fund you in terms of a phase 1 project, and then how long the duration, and whether they allow or require an option, and whether they allow or require, none of them require, but allow a technical and business assistance option. They're all different. They're all different. So the proposal that you would submit to Army has to be for a 6-month project, followed by a 4-month option with the base project not more than 111K. Navy, they want a base project for 140K. And Air Force doesn't want anything about an option. They just want a base project for 150K. Cases. They're all doing the
Jim, Jim, we seem to be having some technical difficulty.
are usually not.
Oh, we just lost him.
He said if that happens, he'll call right back in.
Okay.
So we'll give him
All
just
right.
a second to do that.
I just
Well,
got
hi there, Jim.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching Phil, and then suddenly Phil froze, and then Phil disappeared. So I was concerned about Phil primarily there. But all right.
I appreciate your concern. Thank you.
Yes, all right. Am I still sharing the screen, or do I need to reshare?
Reshare,
Reshare,
please.
please.
Reshare. Okay, so let's go back up.
And it's probably the last minute to minute and a half of that slide that you were cutting out.
Okay, so let's go back to this one. All right. Escape over here. Up over here. Well, what is it? Yeah, it's not. I may have to go back. I may have to go out and come back in. It's not showing me my screen at all for Zoom. Very strange. All right, let me try to come back in.
Okay.
If someone can just hum elevator music for a minute.
Phil, that's all you.
We need the Jeopardy song right now.
Yes, there you go. Yeah. All right, now we're back to share screen. But none of those, oh, there it is. Okay, there's the right screen. Okay. Okay.
There we go.
We're showing agency differences, DoD?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, okay, all right. So this was just showing variability even within agencies. This is all the variability within just the military. All sorts of differences, what Army's doing versus Navy versus Air Force, in terms of duration of project, whether there's an option or not, dollar amounts and so on. And this is just getting worse with time. And last point I made on this slide was topics are generally not being repeated. So if you do see a military topic of interest to you, consider it to be really a one-time opportunity. And if you don't submit, then don't figure that military topic is coming back again. Again, this is the complexity of the military, and I'm just I'm not trying to scare anybody away. I'm just trying to show you that it's a big agency and they got a lot of money, but they're also getting a lot more complicated to work with, being that they have a lot of money and their big agency. Is probably worth understanding all this stuff and getting comfortable, quote unquote, comfortable with it. But it is not, it's not easy to stay on top of because it is changing so much. And here's a good example. I mean, just look at this graphic. This is Air Force. Now, if I had not shown you that, and I said, I'm going to show you a slide on Air Force, what's your stereotype of Air Force? Right? It's somebody with standing behind a podium, short haircut, lots of medals on his chest, and lecturing you about their program. And what do you have instead? You got a 20-something wearing a T-shirt, standing in front of a bunch of bouncer balls. Welcome to AFWorks. This is the Air Force. This is the Air Force's SBIR program these days is predominantly AFWorks. And it's all about doing things differently, doing them faster, and appealing to a different audience than they have appealed to in the past, the traditional SBIR applicant that they've appealed to in the past. Recently, they had 3 topics, and I'll just tell you recently because this is evolving and changing, seems like on a daily basis, but they had topics where basically it was, do you have something you think the Air Force might be interested in? And you go on, that's a contract topic? I thought you said contract topics were specific problems that you were supposed to solve. Yeah, and that's the 99.9% I told you about. This is the 0.1%. Or they say, do you have something you think the Air Force might be interested in? And you are to submit an idea that you think the Air Force might be interested in. This is even to the point of, do you have an existing commercial product that you're selling to to non-defense customers that you think might be of interest to the Air Force? If so, send us a proposal. So this is really outside the box. It's got a lot of attention. It's received a lot of proposals, and it's also been a lightning rod, quite bluntly, for people both in and outside of the Air Force, really, really mad about this, about how they're doing this and how they're spending the money. And that has resulted in some modifications to what they're doing. I think it's resulted recently in some staffing changes at Air Force, but just in general, what I'm describing today for the military is not going to apply to you at Air Force. It's going to be, do you have something that you think the Air Force might be interested in? And believe it or not, in phase 1, what they pay you to do is not prove technical feasibility. No, in phase 1, they give you money to go find a customer at the Air Force. So where the other agencies are giving you money to do R&D, in phase 1, the Air Force is giving you money to go find a customer, an Air Force customer. So it's very unusual, very controversial. So some of the recent changes at Air Force, I'm just describing to you now. The Air Force AFWorks solicitation. Army tried something called Spartan solicitation, where you'd have 4 months to spend $200,000 on a project. And in the 3rd month of that 4-month project, you were to write a phase 2 proposal for up to $2.5 million. One topic, self-propelled howitzer rates of fire. So it's basically, can you help with a cannon that they've got at the Army? So it's kind of an odd program, and it's only one topic, so chances are it's not going to apply to you. DARPA, I think I mentioned earlier, they put out one solicitation per year, and then periodically throughout the year, they make amendments to it where they specify specific topics they want you to address. And then you've got kind of what's left over, which are the regular solicitations. Next one coming out November 24th, proposals due on February 10th. Right. So what the heck is going on with the military? Why are they doing this stuff? Well, first of all, there's been this belief among the military, particularly Air Force, that they have to get smaller and quicker and more open in their procurement for SBIR, STTR, because The adversaries are moving too quickly for the old way of SBIR. Adversaries are coming up with innovative things to hurt our warfighters in very rapid fashion. We need to be moving quicker to prevent that from happening and to maintain a military superiority. So that's kind of the mindset, is we've got to move faster and quicker and be nimbler at the military than we've been in the past. Not making a judgment pro or con. I'm just telling you it's been difficult for them to try to move their bureaucracy faster and still be open and fair and be true to the SBIRSTTR programs. Second of all, in the midst of all this, they've been bringing on a new contractor and a new submission portal that neither of those has occurred very seamlessly. Both have been with some pain. The website works sometimes, it doesn't work real well all the time. There are elements of it that I think are in complete error relative to the way the military does things, but that's not here nor there. They had to come up with a new portal and they came up with it. All right, so that's the military. So again, they're half of the program, so I wouldn't discourage you from participating. I just want you to be prepared for it to be a bit of a challenge to stay on top of and a head scratcher. NSF, 24 topics, as you see there in the middle of the slide. Very broad topics, but you may be interested in some of the areas that they're interested in. Biomed, for example, digital health. They're very much into life sciences. Educational technology. So if you're interested in training and education, I would recommend NSF to you, because the other agency that's primarily interested in education is the Department of Education, and they have an extremely small SBIR program. Space. You just thought NASA was interested in space. Well, now NSF is interested in topics related to space. Energy and power systems. Again, if you're interested in something related to energy, it's not just Department of Energy. Certainly NSF is a candidate for you. I want to mention, though, the breadth and narrowness of NSF. You know, they tout things like that first quote up there: we fund almost anything that's a high quality project. Then they show you 24 topics, including other, basically saying you haven't got an idea that they won't consider. But I want you to consider that breadth up against their narrowness, because both are important to consider. Most people just only look at the breadth and don't consider the narrowness. The breadth says we'll accept a proposal on any topic. The narrowness is they only want to see projects that meet two criteria. The first is they are revolutionary, and that is their word at NSF, revolutionary, with high technical risk, meaning this is really outside the box. This is not a little tweaking. This is not a minor modification. This is major overhaul for what other people are doing and how this problem has been addressed in the past. And the second criteria is, and if your solution works, your idea works, it'll sell like hotcakes because there's a great market for it. So don't just think you can drive any project you want to through NSF just because you got these broad topics. It also needs to be revolutionary with great commercial potential. And if it lacks either of those criteria, NSF may not be the right agency, or at least you need to be very careful about how you present the proposal to show high technical risk. Another forewarning about NSF, they seem to be, at least parts of NSF's SBIRSTTR program, are very oriented towards startup companies, early stage companies, first time applicants, or at least you would be a first time SBIR winner. This would be your company's first time to win, in other words. And the problem seems to be, in my opinion, is they say that SBIRSTTR is a seed fund, and they see it as money to seed companies. So it seeds small companies, it seeds startups. My opinion is that's the wrong interpretation. I believe it is a seed fund to seed ideas, to seed innovation. And innovation and innovative ideas can come from a 10-year-old company, a 20-year-old company, a 40-year-old company. So I don't agree with how they're looking at seed funding. I don't believe that all of their program officers are buying into this idea that it should only be for early stage and startup companies. But my suggestion per the bottom would be communicate with the project officer early on to see if he or she believes that it's only for early stage companies. And if you're not early stage, then you might want to consider applying somewhere other than NSF. Two-step process. You got to get the project pitch we mentioned earlier. You got to get it approved, resulting in an invitation. If you're not invited, then you have to resubmit the pitch. If you are invited, then you can submit a full proposal. Now, let me pause for a minute because there's a real important timing issue here. You are looking at the end of the current pitch cycle for NSF. It ends December 3rd. So if you submitted a project pitch to NSF now, and NSF wasn't happy with it, and they wanted to not allow you to invite you to submit your proposal and require you to revise and resubmit your pitch, then you could do that on December 4th. Right, so you submit your pitch now, it doesn't get accepted, you could resubmit it the next cycle, which starts December 4th. But if you waited and didn't send the original pitch until December 4th, and they didn't like it, and they wanted you to revise it, you may not be able to submit that pitch until the end of the next quarter, which would be like March. So you could be put at a 3-month disadvantage by NSF, given their timing on these pitches. I wish I could tell you with certainty that that would be the case, but look at my last bullet down at the bottom of the page in red. Each program director is making up his or her own rules about these deadlines and these applications. In other words, the rule per the solicitation is that if you submit in the current quarter, and let's say we submit on December 4th, then you cannot resubmit until the next quarter. That is the rule per the solicitation. But some of these program officers have actually been allowing people to revise and resubmit in the same quarter. So it's not always going to be what I just described in terms of being required to sit out till the next quarter. But I think you have to plan on that, because that's the worst case scenario, and that's what some of the program officers are doing. And you won't know what your program officer is doing until you submit your pitch. So if I were you, if I'm interested in getting involved in NSF, I would submit my pitch between now and December 3rd, so that you're guaranteed that you can revise and resubmit it after December 4th if they don't invite a proposal based on your current original submission of the pitch. Where do you find NIH topics? Basically 3 places. They've got an omnibus grant solicitation. It's kind of the catch-all once a year solicitation with 3 due dates: April 5th, September 5th, January 5th. Next one that's it's out right now. The current omnibus solicitation is out right now, and the next due date will be January 5th. So you could shoot for that. They also put out special grant solicitations, and they're generally called RFAs or PAs. RFAs are requests for applications, PAs are program announcements. Doesn't really matter. What it matters is they will put these out, and they'll be focused on COVID-19. They will be focused on type 2 diabetes. They will be focused on some particular health issue or emerging technology. And if you fit that particular solicitation, the nice thing is they may have really, really large budgets. Phase 1s can be $300,000, $600,000. Phase 2s can be $3 million under these special solicitations. So you got the omnibus grant solicitation, the special grant solicitations, and then finally you've got, believe it or not, a contract solicitation. So even though NIH is really a grant agency, they put out a contract solicitation once a year for some things that they think ought to be researched and solved and productized. and that comes out once a year in the summer or fall. So right now you'd be a good candidate for the omnibus solicitation or one of these special solicitations. Timing is not good on the contract solicitation. Basically have to sit out till next year for that. Some unique features to NIH. They have a fast track program where you submit your phase 1 and phase 2 proposals combined. Fast track means it is quicker to move from phase 1 to phase 2 because both proposals are considered and presumably approved in advance. The difficulty with fast track is several. One is it's a lot of work because you're not writing just a phase 1 proposal, you're writing a phase 1 and phase 2 proposal. Second challenge is you have to submit a 12-page commercialization plan along with it, and that's a lot of work. Third, it's really counterintuitive because phase 1 should say, right, we don't know whether it's going to work, it's unproven. We have to prove its feasibility. Well, you never write a phase 2 proposal until you can say with certainty that it's feasible. So now you're writing a proposal that part of it says we don't know whether it's going to be feasible, and the other part of the proposal says now that we know it's feasible. So it's kind of a silly combination of kind of contradictory phases in their proposals. You can submit your NIH proposal, your grant proposal, multiple times. You can do it as many times as you basically want. So it's a great opportunity to submit, get feedback, and if they don't like your proposal, revise it, resubmit it. Second, or I guess it's third from the bottom, the scoop on preliminary data. NIH is somewhat contradictory in what they tell you on this, but I know reviewers at NIH who will not seriously consider your proposal, your phase 1 proposal, unless you have preliminary data in it. And preliminary data is basically some early evidence that you have developed that your innovation is going to work. So preliminary data is work that you or somebody on your team, your subcontract, your consultant, your PI, whomever, some work that they have done that shows your innovation that you're proposing has merit. Not as much as having proven its feasibility, but that it has merit. Very important on an NIH phase 1, in my opinion. And this is just other agencies, and interest of time, I won't go through them, but we have some additional details there. So I think we're about at our second break for the morning, but before I do that, let me ask Kim if we have any questions we want to address before we take our second break.
Yeah, there's a few questions here, Jim. This one from Austin, which I think you just responded to. Can we submit or accept grants for multiple projects at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. Now, if you did submit the same proposal multiple places, and 2 agencies want to fund you on either the same proposal or overlapping proposals, then you cannot accept overlapping money. Now, what I would recommend is I would sit down with both agencies and try to come to an agreement where you're not going to duplicate what you're going to give them. You're not going to duplicate the research that you're going to give the 2 agencies, but you will share the cost of the research between the 2 agencies. And that might be a way to sweeten that offering that both agencies would be willing to allow you to accept the phase 1s and just not do any overlapping research.
Great. This question is from Priya. There might be a subtle distinction here based on how you responded to the last question. Mm-hmm. But this question is, if you get SBIR from one agency, can you apply to a different one for more money?
You can apply for an additional project. So you could write a project on some other aspect of the problem. You could certainly do that. Now, a related question to this would be, can you jump from one agency to the next from, say, between phase 1 and phase 2? The short answer is yes, you can, but the longer answer is it's almost impossible to do. So even though it's allowed, it basically requires the head of agency to approve it. I mean, you're not going to get the Secretary of Health to spend much time deciding to allow you to jump on your SBIR from NIH to NSF or something like that.
Okay, and then the last question is from Tim. Are the SBIR STTR topics written by program officers with a team already in mind to do the work, or are they truly open for competition?
I would say undoubtedly in a program this old, making thousands of awards a year, there have been some wired topics which were predetermined for someone, absolutely. But also having been in the program since the beginning and dealing with thousands of companies, I can count on one hand how many where I knew there was a rigged deal where it was already predetermined. So as government procurement goes, this is a far more fair and level playing field than you will find in many programs. So again, I would encourage you as part of my suggestion that you talk with the agency reps. That's something you may be able to ferret out by talking to them. You call them up and say you're interested in the topic, and they go, "Oh, well, why are you interested in the topic?" And you explain, they go, "Well, okay, I guess you can apply if you want to." And you say, "I've got a few questions." "Oh, really? Well, okay, what are your questions?" And if you're getting just a real, a negative response, that could be one interpretation is they've already kind of decided who they'd like to give this to, and it's not you. But by and large, that is not the situation. So I think you can go into the program feeling that in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be a fair and open competition.
Okay, that's all we have for questions right now.
All right, I've got 10:59. Let's just call it 11 even. So let's come back at 11:10, and we will pick up our conversation at that time, and perhaps Daisha can give us our final tally of the votes for which agency you want to go through, and we'll start when we come back with that, so we'll know which agency's instructions we're going to look at. But 10-minute break.
All right, thank you.
All right, I've got 10 minutes past the hour, so Tahisha, do we have a final tally on our what instructions we're going to go through?
All right, yes. So we actually had not much change. We had one change their vote and one add. So we've got 10 for NSF, 3 for NIH, and 2 for DoD.
Wow, okay, and no one wants DOE at all, so okay, all right. Well, they're going to do NSF. All right, appreciate you all voting on that. So, yep. Kim, any questions we needed to answer before we get going?
Let's see. I don't see, sorry about that. I don't see any other questions. There's still a couple votes coming in for NIH. Yeah, that's it. No other additional questions.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get rolling along, and when we get to the instruction part here in a little bit, we'll focus on NSF. And again, for those of you that want the other agencies, the instructions are in the materials. I'll point to what slide number they're at when we get to that part of our webinar. So you've still got my comments that will hopefully be helpful. All right, so we were talking about differences. I think we've talked a lot about agency differences here. This is a summary of three of the big 5 agencies and how they differ. And again, it's just not a one size fits all when it comes to SBIR. You talk about SBIR, you talk about STTR, but there's so many variations among the agencies when you look at it. How do you understand the differences? One is to read the solicitation or the FO or whatever they're calling it, or the NOFO, and get to know as much as you can by reading that document about their idiosyncrasies and their take on SBIR or STTR. So when you get into conversation with them, you're not asking them the basics that you could have gotten from the document itself. All right, so we found a topic, we've talked with the agency, we've decided to submit. Now we need to get on electronic submission. We need to get registered for electronic submission. All the agencies now require electronic submission of your proposal, and all require multiple registrations, not a registration, but multiple registration. Grant agencies typically are going to require you to register among other areas. You're going to have to register at grants.gov. I would never speak this way, but grants.gov sucks was a comment we received from one of the program managers in describing this system. It was a good idea when it was created, maybe 7-8 years ago, as a common electronic submission portal or process for all grant agencies, and it just was not implemented well. And they've done a lot of patchwork on it over the years. And it's gone from being just horrendous to just being awful. So it's progress that far anyway. Contract agencies each has its own approach. There's nothing called contracts.gov out there. Each has their own submission system. Multiple registrations, up to 6 registrations. I don't know what to tell you. That's just what it requires. And there are so many things we could say about why don't the feds get their act together? Why don't and that's not where we are. We're here to try to apply for and hopefully receive funding, which leads to good innovative development, which leads to products and services and revenue streams for our companies. And we're not going to fix the federal government, and I'm not going to try, but I'm just trying to tell you what the system is. And the system is, if you're applying to NIH, 6 registrations, NSF be 5 registrations. DoD up there shows 4 registrations, so it'll be multiple registrations. Just get it out of the way. Just do it now. Get it done. If there's an agency that you're anticipating applying to in the future, go ahead and do the registrations now. Get it done. SAM is particularly problematic in terms of taking time. It can take weeks. It can take 3 weeks for SAM to plod along and finally get put into place. In the middle of all this, the DoD was creating their new submission portal, and then they got tied into something called login.gov. So in the middle of the pandemic, the federal government decided it was a good idea to create a common login process across multiple federal agencies, electronic submission and websites, and DoD is one of them. So now you have to register on login to be registered at DoD SBIR. Now, again, I'm not, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what's going on out there. All right, so get registered. Like I say, get it done now, get it out of the way so you can concentrate on the proposal. So let's talk about the draft proposal. This is a major effort, obviously. Realize as you start developing the proposal, each agency, different format. This is typical. What you'll see, though, are the following sections. Significance. There'll be something in the agency's instructions that say, tell us why this is a big deal. Tell us why it's important. Tell us why this is a problem. And you're thinking, well, you know, dumb DoD, you're the one that asked for it, so I guess you think it's a problem, so that's why I'm responding to it. Well, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for you to respond with an understanding of the problem, that you grasp the military's problem. Otherwise, if you're submitting to NSF, NIH, realize that your reviewer has probably just read 4 proposals about just horrendous problems, something that is causing death, suicide, starvation, crippling disease, living in poverty, you know, every horrible thing you can imagine, you know, kind of like 2020, every horrible thing you can imagine, and then pick up your proposal. What are you going to say? And if your proposal says, well, you know, here's something I've been thinking might be worth working on, I don't know if it's a big deal or not, you're already in trouble, because the reviewer has been just inundated with critically horrible situations that need to be solved, and now you're saying you're not sure there's any big deal. So find a way to talk about the significance of your problem that you're addressing. Innovation, we said earlier, the agencies want to know what's innovative about this. Be very careful in reading their instructions as to how much they want that addressed, where they want it discussed, and if there are any criteria or description or definition of innovation they want you to match up against. Qualifications of the team, so it's not just the PI, it's the whole team. Do you have all the bases covered? Does it look like you have the capabilities to do this work? Aims and objectives, in my opinion, they're basically the same thing. The objectives is the term you'll see at 10 of the agencies, and aims is the term that will be used at National Institutes of Health, but I believe they would say it's the same thing. So it's the milestones, if you will, the steps along the way between today and proving the feasibility of your idea, the intermediate steps that you have to reach. And then the approach or research plan is the actual tasks, the activities that will get you to each of those objectives. So those are very typical sections across the agencies. Atypical is how much the agency wants to address commercialization in phase 1. So NSF wants pages. They want 4 to 7 pages of commercialization in your phase 1 proposal. DoD wants a page or 2. USDA wants a couple of pages, but notice all those are pages, pages, pages. What does NIH want in your phase 1? Paragraphs. They don't want pages. They just want a couple of paragraphs. You know, we can talk more about this if you wish, but NIH just doesn't put as high of a priority on commercialization in your phase 1 proposal. But I will tell you that is NIH staff's attitude, that it's not a big deal in phase 1. I'm seeing more and more NIH reviewers who are expecting to see some level of treatment of commercialization within your phase 1 NIH proposal. But before you get your proposal considered for its merits, you got to get past what my middle stepson calls the rules police. He is an NIH reviewer, and he says there's the rules police, and the rules police enforce the rules. So they do step number 1 up here, which is kind of the pre-screen or administrative review, where they look at your proposal, they look at the instructions, and if you messed up somewhere, well, they might just throw your proposal out. You say they wouldn't do that. You want to bet? They will. And you're not quite always sure what will be just a black mark on you versus what will actually get your proposal thrown out. Let me give you an example though, one that I'm still curious about this. A guy had submitted a proposal, phase 1, to the military, came back, rejected, and the debrief was not very specific. So he asked me for my opinion. So I'm reviewing it, and it's an okay proposal. It's not perfect, but it's not bad either. And I didn't really find anything really drastically wrong with it until I got to the budget. The budget was for $150,000.07. Guess what the budget limit for that agency was? 150,000 and no cents. And I'm looking at this going, is it possible that when the instructions clearly say do not include a budget for more than $150,000, would they throw a proposal out under pre-screening for being 7 cents over? I'll never know, and I'm sure they wouldn't admit it if they did, but that's the sort of thing you worry about is will the rules police nail you for some minor technicality in your proposal? It happens all the time, so I think you should plan that is going to occur. So don't overlook the nitpicks, the details. Then it goes to the technical reviewers who will evaluate it for its technical merits. And as shown there under 2A and 2B, it's going to be both the quality of the research and also the commercialization potential. The sub-bullets under 2A, this is just typical criteria, but each agency will give you specific criteria used in evaluating your technical merits. Coming out of 2, you will get some score from the reviewers. It may be numeric, it may be numeric, but with a lower score being better, like golf. It may be excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. It'd be some sort of scoring system. And you then go to step number 3, which is the agency saying, okay, which of these are we actually going to fund? And the problem comes up in my example there on number 3 is when the agency has, in this example, 641 proposals that could be funded and only 229 that could be afforded, for which they had budget. So you got 641 that your reviewers say ought to be funded, but you can only afford as an agency a third of them. How do you convert the 641 fundable into 229 that actually get awards? Well, if you got a quarter, you call it. I'll toss it, you call it. Throw it down stairwell, let's see which one goes farthest. Oh, did you sign it left-handed? We all know what that means, right? This is the black box. Number 3 is black box in terms of how the final decisions are made. I will suggest that if you were to qualify as a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business, a veteran-owned business, certainly a disabled veteran-owned business, a business located in a hub zone or an enterprise zone or some special opportunity zone or something like that, make sure you indicate that on the proposal, because in my opinion, that might make a difference. Now, the agencies for decades have adamantly denied that they ever consider any of the demographics, but I don't think that's always true, and I think there has been a softening of that position in recent years. So don't write every other paragraph saying our woman-owned business is woman-owned business. The women who own our business owned by women, because that sounds too much like you're relying on that as the basis for why you think you should be awarded, as opposed to the content of your proposal and the innovation that you're proposing. Don't think the rules police exist. Here's their checklist from the Department of Energy a few years ago. Number of hours the PI is working. Did you check all the boxes on the cover page? Did you use a font smaller than 12 point? And notice here at the bottom, they're quite blunt. If you don't meet all of these requirements, your proposal will be thrown out. So just follow the instructions, okay? Don't get anything else out of today's webinar. Just follow the freaking instructions. It will help you get through the pre-screen, pass the rules police. Also helps you organize proposal the way the reviewer wants to see it. Now, this is where we have the instructions for the various 4 different agencies that I told you we had. So if you're interested in DoD, it starts here on, let me get you the right slide number here. Slide 67 through, looks like 67 through 76. I'm sorry, through 78. So this is all, and again, notice I've made all these comments down on the right-hand margins, all these annotations, all sorts of things about my thoughts about this proposal, instructions, format, things that people oftentimes mess up on. And so there are over 50 comments in the DoD one. Then I've got a couple of slides on DoD, and a big part of DoD is that they're now changing from a common format to each agency doing their own format for their proposal. And then this is NIH starting on slide 79. And NIH continues through slide 88. So these again are annotated comments for the instructions for NIH. And that takes us down to, this will be slide number 89, and that's where you need to be if you want to follow on the, as we walk through some of these comments on the NSF proposal format. So this is slide number 89 in your package. This is just showing graphically the NSF proposal. Everything that shows up as a blue box is a form in the FastLane format, and anything that shows up as green is a PDF file that you have to create and attach to those forms. So basically the NIH format is a package of forms that you then write PDF files and attach those to those forms. And all this is done electronically through what's called FastLane. That's the system used by NSF. Now I'm going to concentrate on what is outlined by the dotted box there, if you will, which is the project description. Now these are the current instructions. I've not seen anything new for the post-December 3rd time frame yet, so I don't know if they'll be changing the instructions, but as of right now, these are the current ones. And I'm going to bounce through a lot of stuff here because you've got a lot of background information. Here are the program officers here at the bottom of page 2. These are the people that when you send in your project pitch, one of them will review your pitch and give you comments back, but you don't know who it is until you submit your pitch. So do the pitch and then you'll be in touch with one of these individuals. All right, page 3 says instructions, but actually those are not instructions. It's more description. It goes on, Page 5, it says instructions again. It's really not instructions for the proposal, but these are instructions starting at the bottom of page 5 for the pitch. So starting here on page 6, you go to an online form. That's where you find the pitch form. And then these bullets will tell you kind of what to avoid in your proposal, in your project pitch. And towards the bottom of this page, page 6, this is comment number 30. This is where they actually tell you what goes into the pitch. So the pitch is to include name, address, phone number, contact information, 500 words on technical innovation, 500 words on the phase 1 work plan, 250 words on commercialization, and 250 words on the company. And, grand total 1,500 words. It's a pretty good description of the project to be sent to the agency. And again, you don't know right now, but one of those program officers we saw earlier will receive this and give you feedback on it. Very important, the bottom of page 7, this is comment JG33, objectives not responsive to the solicitation. Translation, do not do this stuff in your NSF proposal or it'll get thrown out. So first one is key, evolutionary development or incremental modification of established products or proven concepts. So you don't want to call it evolutionary. You don't want to talk about it being incremental. You sure as heck don't want to talk about it being a modification of your existing product. You want to avoid the words, not only the concepts, but the words shown in this, the bulleted sections at the bottom of page 7. We're still looking for the instructions though. We're at page 8, we're on to page 9, and finally on page 9, this is comment JG42, finally, the detailed instructions. Here are the actual instructions for what go into your NSF proposal. So you got a cover sheet, name, address, phone number with certifications. Certifications, very important term. Certification means you are swearing on your grandmother's grave that all of the following are truthful and correct. And if anything is not truthful or correct, the agency reserves the right to come back and basically ask you why you lied on your proposal, which you do not want to do. So when you see the word certify, make sure you are real clear that what you're certifying, that you understand it, you agree to it. Project summary, bottom of page 9. This is a one-pager, which they tell you is not an abstract, but guys, it's an abstract, okay? Basically an abstract. Cut into 3 boxes, shown here in the middle of page 10. Box 1, 2, and 3 tells you kind of what goes into it. That's again, it's not to be an abstract, but I think that's pretty much what most of us are going to think of it as being. Then you go into the project description. This is my comment JG47, 15-page. This is the heart of the technical proposal for NSF. So you got 15 pages maximum, 9 pages minimum. The vast majority of your competitors are sitting at 15 pages and working hard to cram it into 15 pages. So if you're down around 9.5 pages, even though you're happy because you're meeting the minimum, you're not really competitive in my opinion, because I doubt that you wrote such more concise and perfect terms and sentences than your average writer and got down that far. It's probably you got down to 9.5 pages because you've left important stuff out. All right, so this is what this 15-pager consists of, starting at the bottom of the page. You start with an elevator pitch. You go, elevator pitch? What's an elevator pitch? I mean, the only elevator pitch I know of is like what they tell you to do when you're at a venture capital conference and you hop in an elevator and there's a VC and you got between the first and third floors to kind of pitch them on your project. Yeah, that's exactly what this is. That's the elevator pitch. That's how the technical proposal begins, guys, is with a commercialization elevator pitch. Now, this may seem weird, but this is the format that NSF wants you to use. So up to 1 page on the elevator pitch, talk about the customer, talk about the value proposition, talk about the innovation. That, by the way, is the first time in at least 3, maybe 4 times they're going to ask you to describe the innovation in this section. And my recommendation is each one of those descriptions of innovation should be separate, distinct from each other. It should not be just a repeat, but they should all be consistent. They should all be saying the same thing, saying it in different ways, sometimes elaborating on it. So that's your 1-page elevator pitch. It's a 1-pager. When they get done reading that, they kind of understand the project, they understand the market, they understand the great opportunity this is. They're ready to buy. And the rest of the proposal is just reinforcing that decision. So elevator pitch is followed by the commercial opportunity. This is 2 to 4 pages on the broad societal need, the market drivers. How have you validated that there's an opportunity here? What are your risks bringing it to the marketplace? What's the competitive landscape? What's your approach on the commercialization? Are you licensing? Are you going to have somebody else build components? You're going to assemble them? You're going to do the whole thing yourself? What's your timeline? What resources do you need to get your commercialization plan in place? And again, this is in your technical proposal. So the first section was elevator pitch. The second is commercial opportunity. You're describing all the commercialization sides of your SBIR project. You have not begun yet to describe the technical project. So elevator pitch, commercial opportunity. Now you got the innovation. In 1 to 3 pages, describe the innovation. Very important section, as I said earlier. NSF review panels can spend a lot of time debating whether this is really innovative or not. So you need to not shortchange that 1 to 3 pages and really talk about what is innovative and from a technical standpoint in this project. Followed by the company team, another 1 to 3 pages. So we describe the company, and you're describing two parts of the company, in my opinion. One is the technical skill set of the company and the team, and the other is the commercialization experience and skill set of the team. So both are relevant, both should be included in this section. And then finally, the fifth section of the project description, the fifth section of this 15-pager is called Technical Discussion and R&D Plan. And so the entire technical proposal is basically stuffed into this one section called Technical Discussion and R&D Plan. Now it's a lengthy section. Notice minimum of 5. They recommended something upwards towards 7 pages. But a lot of people, because this is the fifth of 5 sections, and it's only in one section with 4 little bullets behind it, they don't think this is very important. That would be the wrong interpretation, because roughly half of your NSF reviewers, this is the main thing that they want to review and feel comfortable with, is this technical discussion and R&D plan. So this needs to be a well-written, well-conceived, and then well-written description of the innovation and how you're going to prove the feasibility of your innovation in phase 1 and include a timeline. All right, then we got, after the 15-pager, then references. So fortunately, anything that you reference in the way of literature and so on in the 15-pager, you don't have to put a reference list in there. It can be a separate list. Bio sketches, sketch means not to exceed 2 pages per employee. Got to have one for the PI, and included also for any key persons on the project, whether they're employees of the company or part of the consultants or subcontractors. Budget goes on for quite some time here. I've got multiple pages just going down through that. So I'll just kind of bounce through that. Now, toward the bottom here, page 15, look for comment JG71. Actually, go back up to JG70 earlier in the page. 2 things you can do with NSF, which are very nice in my opinion. One is you can include up to $10,000 in your budget for hiring an accountant and or buying accounting software to get your accounting system ready for government procurement. Chances are real good your accounting system right now is not suitable for big contracts and grants from the government. This is NSF saying you can take $10,000 out of your budget and dedicate it to that. That is tremendously generous. It's a very good idea. I would recommend doing it if you don't have a approved accounting system, approved by the federal government accounting system right now. Then look at JG71. You can spend another 10 to 20,000. I'm sorry, another 10,000 for a total of 20, including the accounting section. Another $10,000 to participate in a boot camp that is a lot like, it's like a mini I-Corps. So if you have participated in I-Corps, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then this is basically a customer discovery opportunity where up to $10,000 of your budget can be used for interviewing potential customers, suppliers, thought leaders, competitors, and so on, to kind of refine your idea of your product. And NSF expects most people to participate in this boot camp, even if you've gone through I-Corps. So consider long and hard not signing up for this boot camp when you submit your proposal to NSF, because if you don't, I think that might hurt your chances of success, because NSF doesn't think you're playing the game. And again, more budget on page 16. Budget justification is kind of your narrative describing the budget. Current pending support of the PI and senior personnel. This is where we would talk about other proposals that we're submitting that are similar to this and involving our people. Facilities, equipment, and resources towards the bottom of page 17 there. And then a bunch of supplementary documents. I will emphasize supplementary document S4, letters of support. This is my comment JG 89. So comment JG 89, you can include up to 3 letters of support, and these should be commercialization letters of support, not technical letters of support. So the reviewers don't want to hear from somebody at the university saying what a great technology you've got, because the reviewers feel they can competently evaluate that. But they love to see letters from one of 3 categories: a potential customer, a potential funder, or a potential strategic partner, or as you and I would think, a licensee, someone that might license this technology. And this is all, those 3 categories are shown in my comment JG 90. So it's strongly recommended. Interpretation, do it. Don't make it optional. If it's strongly recommended, you should be doing it. So include those letters. And resubmission, if this is a resubmission, which is allowed at NSF, then S8 tells you how to do the resubmission, and including a 1-pager on there. All right, and then finally there, my comment JG92, you need to submit a copy of the invitation from your, when you submitted your project pitch, the invitation you got from the program officer should be attached. All right, so that's the instructions for NSF. And then if you're interested in DOE, that would be the instructions are found on pages 110 to 116. So I'll bounce down through that. And again, they're all annotated. All right, so get this thing drafted. You know, just pull it together, and it's up to you. Do you write front to back? Do you write project description first? Or, you know, how do you like to write? It's up to you. No single right way to do it. It's whatever you want to do. But then get this thing reviewed before you submit it, because there are problems with typos. And I'll, again, interest of time, I'll just bounce through these, but these are examples where spell checker was perfectly happy with what you said. But unfortunately, what you said is not what you were trying to say. This one, I see asses a lot in SBIRSTTR proposals, and that's because you were trying to type assess, and you typed so fast you left the last S off. And so your assess became asses. And when spell checker sees asses, spell checker's okay with that. That's just several donkeys standing together. Humanoid hopefully can help you catch some of these things that the spell checker will not. This is I love this last one here. It was on splinting. You know, when you break your leg, you get it splinted. And they were talking about an innovative new splint. But in this particular paragraph, they said that the PI was trained in advanced spitting. And of course, it was supposed to be trained in advanced splinting, but a small typo was now spitting. And once again, spell checker thought that was just fine. But, you know, some of us are just amateur spitters. You know, we just, you know, when we go run or you know, are out hiking or something. But, you know, baseball players are more of your advanced spitters. So, and, you know, again, none of these were caught by spell checkers. So who's going to catch it? Get an outside reviewer, a humanoid, to look at this. I guarantee you there's something in these instructions you're going to miss. See how many pages you saw for NSF and things that keep saying instructions before you actually get to the instructions. And so our recommendation is you get someone to review this that was not involved in drafting the proposal. Now, it could be somebody else in the company. It could be a spouse or a teenager in the household that is highly critical of everything you do with your life. Might as well get some benefit from that criticism for a change. Basically, it doesn't have to be anybody that understands your technology. It just needs to be someone who can read and pay attention to the detail and see what you wrote and contrast it with what the instructions said and point out where there are mistakes. And very important, that last bullet there, you got to get somebody who's willing to criticize what you've done. If they just are going to pat you on the back and tell you how smart you are, then that really doesn't help you, because trust me, the real reviewers are not going to just pat you on the back and tell you how smart you are. So as part of the today's session, your sponsor, the Hub, Texas Tech, has agreed to have me available to you all to review a phase 1 proposal, draft proposal for you anytime within the next year, and that will be at no cost. So this will be an opportunity to get one person's opinion. I'm not saying I'm the only one you should get a review from, but at least you could get my opinion on your proposal. Now, kind of the rules of that, I do these proposals on a first come, first served basis, meaning I only take as many requests as I can competently handle for any given deadline. And the big deadlines, NSF, NIH, DOD, DOE, I get backlogged. And at some point I cut off and just can't take anymore for a given deadline. So when you think you might want to take advantage of this, send me an email. Remind me that you were in the Texas Tech webinar on 16th of November, 2020, and what agency you want to submit to, what the deadline you're submitting for. I'll respond to you about my availability and when I could, when I need your proposal. And you and I will iterate a couple of times before we probably agree on a date by which you will get me your proposal. Send it to me as a email attachment, either in Word or PDF format. I like Word because then I can actually make suggestions on text editing, edits. I will put all my comments on the document, including my more substantive comments in balloons typically. Email it back to you so you've got my comments in writing, but promptly. And again, courtesy of Kim and the Hub, there is no charge for that within 1 year of today's workshop. And also, some of you have one-on-one consultations this afternoon. And I didn't know if all the slots would be taken when I wrote this slide, and I believe all of them are spoken for at this point, but that'll be additional benefit for those that were able to sign up for that. All right, so get it reviewed. Submit 5 days before the deadline. Why? People think electronic submission means you can submit right up to the last minute. My all-time record now is I work as a subcontractor on for the Department of Energy for a program that they have helping phase 1 applicants, and their proposals are due at 11:59 p.m. And I remember reviewing this one guy's proposal, still reviewing it at 10 p.m. that night. You don't want to be waiting like that, because pipelines can become clogged. Interestingly, at another function, the DOE representative who was doing a presentation said that 94% of phase 1 proposals come in the last 15 minutes of that deadline. And so they've actually tried to build their system to be able to handle that sudden influx of proposals. You really don't want to be relying on that, though, because there are times when these things crash because of too many people submitting at once. Things will go wrong. I mean, your power will die, your internet will go out, something will require you to make an emergency trip to the vet or whatever it might be. Don't want to wait till the last minute. The new DoD submission portal, if you're submitting there, I would not wait until the last day for that thing, because that's not working that well. And if this is your first proposal after getting registered on SAM and grants.gov and so on, there are commonly inconsistencies between these registrations that have to be resolved, and that can take 48 hours for the resolution to be take effect, much less finding the problem in the first place. And of course, help desk become harder to get to at the last minute. So I recommend taking whatever the due date is and backing up 5 days and make that your deadline for submission. All right, so we found our topic, we talked with the agency, we got registered for submission, we got the proposal drafted, we got a review, we revised it based on the reviews and uploaded it before the deadline. We then sit and wait for the agency to announce the winners. And after the winners are announced, if you are not one of the winners, then you are entitled to what is called a debriefing. And a debriefing is simply a feedback on what the reviewers liked and disliked about your proposal. The purpose of this debrief is to improve your chances of success next time. So the second to last bullet down there, debriefings are provided to help improve an offer's potential response to future solicitations. So that's a bureaucratic way of saying this is an opportunity to get feedback on your proposal, and hopefully you can find some things that you did wrong and correct those and not do them on your next proposal and do better next time. Another reason for this debrief, to take a look at this debrief, is does it look to be encouraging of a resubmission? Now, many of the grant agencies, remember contract versus grant, we've talked about that all morning here. A lot of the contract agencies do not allow resubmissions. Most of the grant agencies do allow resubmission. So if you submit it to NIH or NSF, you got a rejection, take a look at the debrief. Does it basically say this is the most god-awful, horrible, worst, nightmarish, bizarre, crazy, funny, in a weird, sick sort of way proposal, and you look at that and you go, wow, I wonder if I had to resubmit. No, I think you're hearing that they're not really excited about it. But a lot of times these rejections will say, you know, boy, it's really a good proposal, but you really seem to have messed up on, or I don't understand your statement that, or why don't you have an expert in, or are you aware of the work done by? And you look at these and you go, well, shoot, that's all stuff I could fix. Or one I got, was it 2 weeks ago, I got a debrief from a company that got turned down from NSF phase 1. They got 3 scores, 3 different reviewers. One is an excellent, one is a very good, and one is a fair. And I look at that and say that's good resubmission opportunity, because 2 out of the 3 thought you walked on water. You just got to try to figure out what that third one was, what they were smoking, or what they didn't understand, or what they have in their bee in their bonnet that you can address. So we like getting debriefs. We highly recommend you get the debriefs. Some of the agencies, particularly the grant agencies, they just send them to you. You don't even have to request them. The military is more challenging though. If you want a debrief from the military, you generally have to ask for it. And you have to ask for it within a relatively short period of time. It's a matter of typically a few days. And then when you get it, a lot of times it's not all that specific about the concerns, the issues. But we always recommend looking at these, and win or lose, we recommend you look at the debrief, because even when you win, it's not because you had a perfect proposal. And I know that because as Kim said earlier, I've reviewed hundreds and hundreds of them. I've never seen a perfect proposal, but it's not because you were a perfect proposal. You won because you were better than a lot of other proposals, and they're going to have things that they're still going to criticize that would be good for you to know about, so that you avoid them next time, and that you avoid them or fix them by the time you're applying for phase 2. Some common mistakes, and yes, before somebody tells me, I do know the word mistake is misspelled. See, it's a mistake. See, okay. All right, so don't include extra pages. If the limit is 20 pages, don't include 22 pages, because some of them will throw it out on the basis of that. Number 11, don't just talk about technology without talking about the value. So what's the value of this solution being 3 nanoseconds faster than competing solutions? Who cares? What's the difference? Number 8, again, clearly describe what's innovative about this project. Number 9, and I want to emphasize this because if any of you are submitting to DoD, they make it sound like they're interested in commercial civilian solutions and applications. And I just want to tell you that 99.9999% of the time, what they're interested in is themselves. It's for the warfighter, it's for the DoD, and I think there's a lot of lip service is maybe a strong term, but we'll use it towards dual use and towards other applications. What they really care about is, can the warfighter benefit from this? Can we save lives? Can we improve the national defense? Can we reduce the cost of national defense with your innovation? All right, NSF, organized proposal well. We had little time to dig through each proposal. Real tendency to cast aside proposals if we couldn't detect something valuable from the start. So if it's disorganized, it's repetitive, it doesn't, or worse yet, it's disjointed. You're frustrating the reviewers, and at some point they give up. Number two, and this is a common problem in many agencies, is overly ambitious work plan, trying to do too much, trying to solve too many problems. Phase one is $250,000 or even less money than that. And it's 12 months or less. You can't do that much with that much money and that much time. If you think it's a lot of money, you're probably a starving student or a relatively new business person, and you probably don't realize that part of the money that you're going to get should be used for profit and also for your indirect costs, your overhead costs of being in business, which further reduces the budget for doing the research. Site work, number 9, site work by others in the field, and don't be derogatory when you cite it, because you know, if you badmouth somebody in one of your citations, Murphy's Law says they will then be your reviewer, and they're not going to appreciate you badmouthing them. NIH common problems, number 10, again, lack of innovation. If they don't see something that's high risk, high technical risk, then they're going to be less enthusiastic about it. Number 7, again, that problem of being overly ambitious in the work plan. Number 17, insufficient consideration of statistical needs. So this is a research project when it comes to NIH. They expect it to be done as a research project. They expect statistically valid results. They expect to see a sampling of the population that is adequate and appropriate, given who you would be ultimately your customers. It's a research project, and talking about hypotheses and null hypothesis and so on is not out of place when it comes to NIH. All right, I'm going to close out with the question that everyone has on their mind is, where do I see sample winning proposals? People always want to see sample winning proposals. Unfortunately, I think you want to a lot of times see sample winning proposals for the wrong reason, which is, I want to see something I can copy. But let's show you a couple of sample proposals, and I'll pick up on that comment. This is Department of Defense. So you find under their frequently asked questions, where do I find a sample? You click on it, and it takes you to this proposal. Now, I'm only showing you the first and last pages. Long story short is, if you look at reference number 1, it references a symposium done in 1983. You're going, man, why are you quoting almost, what, 37-year-old, why are you quoting 37-year-old papers? Well, continue to read that reference number 1, though. It's a proceedings of a 1983 symposium, and the proceedings are in press. So when would you be publishing the proceedings of a 1983 symposium? What, 1983, maybe 1984? So this is a 37-year-old proposal, maybe only 36 years old proposal. That's horrible. It's not at all referencing the current format, much less the quality that's required to win in this program. It's a much more competitive program than it was in those days. So I would avoid that like the plague. Now, with a little bit of searching on the internet, you might find this one better, but not a whole lot better. And there's the URL down there if you want to take a look at it. I think it's more recent, but it has a real sketchy work plan, research plan. which is indicative of a proposal from a frequent winner, someone that wins a lot, company that wins a lot, because they can be real sketchy in their project description. The only real good samples out there, in my opinion, are those found at the National Institutes of Health, or more specifically, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, at the URL shown at the bottom of this page. You got phase ones here, you got phase twos, you got SBIR and STTR, you got a fast track in here. And these are full proposals, including all the goofy grants.gov forms and so on. So they're pretty good. And these are from kind of 2013 to 2017 tenure, which is, again, still pretty good. NSF, there is nothing out there that's worth taking a look at. And the only things I've found on the internet for NSF are out of date in terms of format. So if you want to look at sample proposals, fine, but do it for the right reason. Realize that proposals win for different reasons. You're assuming when you look at one and start copying it that it won because it's the perfect proposal. And again, I would argue that seldom, if ever, happens. Look at all the other reasons: right proposal at the right time. You're a known quantity proposer because they're used to getting you things from you. They're funding something on socio-demographics. There weren't very many good proposals that funding cycle, so they funded the best of the worst. You don't know when you're looking at a proposal which of these categories it might fall into. So my recommendation is you do not want to copy sample proposals. You want to critique them, you learn from them, you do what they've done, include it in your style, your format, but learn from sample proposals. Don't try to just copy from them. And with that, I'm at the end of my slides. Kim, do we have any final questions we should cover?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Let's see, we have a question from Austin, and bear with me, this is a 2 or 3 parter here.
Okay.
If I decide I want to design the howitzer example you gave for DoD, should I also try to get the licensing for Class 3 weaponry so it's legal to own a howitzer like that? Or would they be fine with a scaled down and non-lethal prototype during phase 2, considering the design of the mechanism would not be field tested? Or even do you use a subcontractor to build it?
Wow, I guess earlier I misstated that no one in the group would be interested in this topic, and clearly someone is. The best thing I can recommend is download that topic and read it, because it goes on page after page after page about what they want you to do in the various phases and so on, and that's the starting point. My biggest concern is whether that deadline has passed or not. So I would recommend this afternoon is not too early to be looking on the DoD website and see if you can find that topic and see if it's still open for you. See what they say.
All right. The next question is from Brian. This question says, WRT to the primary employee status for an SBIR. If the company only employs a contract labor, can the PI be hired as contract labor, or do they have to be, quote, on the payroll? Is there any other required company infrastructure?
Basically, upon award, they need to be an employee of the company. Now, they can be for some reason, leased employee is allowed, but any sort of contractor is not. So it needs to be a W-4 type employee, but it doesn't have to be until the project is actually awarded. So you can wait at least that long to do that. That's the main requirement for the PI. For the employment of the PI, and we had the requirement a while ago about being primarily employed by the small business during the course of the contractor grant. The company will need to be registered on SBIR or STTR for whichever agency you're submitting to. So that goes back to the registration discussion we had a while ago. I think those are probably the major points. Again, remembering the company must be primarily US owned, and usually, I'll just say usually all phase one work on an SBIR must be done in the United States. There are sometimes exceptions by some agencies to that, but on STTR, if you have a university, it must be a university that's located in the United States. It's going to do the research in the United States. So those are probably the major things that come to mind in terms of requirements on the company.
There's a question here from Tim. Can I both be the PI on an STTR and a partner in the business? So owning, I guess, less than 49%.
Yeah, overall, yeah. There is quite a bit of overlap allowed between ownership and employment. And even, and I think I'm going to talk with some folks this afternoon about this, even someone who is a faculty member, and let me tell you what you can do per the SBIR program, the STTR program, you still would have to confirm whether the university that you are employed at would allow this, but it is allowed by the SBIR STTR programs that a faculty member can own the business, submit a proposal under the name of the business, have somebody else be primarily employed by the business, like a postdoc that's hired on as an employee, and the business subcontract some of the work to the university. And as long as the faculty member is not representing his or her small business on the project, he or she could represent the university on the project. So you look at it and you go, man, that is awfully cozy between company and university and faculty member. And the answer is, you're right. But there has to be at least a division that the faculty member could not be representing both their small business and their university on the same project. The way we describe it is you can only wear one hat on the project. And again, you'd want to confirm, if you're at Texas Tech, you got to confirm with Texas Tech, would they allow that or not? I'm just telling you what the SBIR STTR programs would allow.
Okay, are there any other questions from the audience that we'd like for Jim to consider before we close out our session? I'll wait a moment here.
So I either answered every possible question you'd ever have, or I put you completely to sleep by this point, or buried you in all this.
No, you added a whole new comedic shtick to your routine here, Jim, that I have to tell you, made me chuckle there for a bit.
Thanks.
I like
Tim,
it.
I have one other question, if I may ask.
Sure, Phil, go ahead.
Let's say you have a team that wants to apply to NIH phase one and NSF phase one. I've heard that the NSF focuses more on the technology itself in terms of validity and feasibility with competitive solutions, competing solutions, whereas the NIH focuses more on the patient's response to the innovation. In other words, focusing more on the human side of it. And because each perspective would cast a different tenor on the, on the application. I just want to get your comments on that, because then they might be able to even more justify application of both. One's more focusing on the technology, one's more focused on the patient response. What do you think?
I have never heard that before. I've never heard that distinction between NIH and NSF. What I would recommend is identifying, and at NSF this will be by doing a pitch. NIH, you could simply call someone at NIH who is an SBIR program officer for an institute that you think would be appropriate to fund the project. And as part of your questions, ask them that. Do you guys have more of a patient-centric view of the project or not? And if so, then great, you've got some great insight there, and that could impact how you write the proposal to each of the two. I have not seen that. The main distinction I would make between NIH and NSF is NIH is going to be more willing to accept a project that is an improvement of something you're doing right now, versus NSF says, we don't want any improvements. We want whole new stuff. We want revolutionary stuff. So they tend to be more outside the box and higher risk stuff than NIH. Now, it's not that NIH won't fund the high risk. It's just that it's not required to have that higher risk to get NIH funding, if that makes sense. Okay.
All right. One comment and then one question. Marissa Walker, she put in the chat that she is in the graduate certificate program for grants and proposals and can help with proofreading and editing your proposals. And she's got her email address in here, MARIWalk, WALK at ttu.edu. So if you need an extra set of eyes for proofing and reviewing, she's happy to help. And that's a true Red Raider there, willing to step up. Thank you very much, Marissa. And another question from Austin: how specialized does the employee have to be once you receive an award? Could it just be a college student that does math and acts as a critic for the project goals?
Hopefully Austin's not talking about the PI in this case. They're talking about somebody who's working on the project but would not be the PI, because the PI needs to be, I think, something stronger than a student, certainly stronger than an undergrad student. Maybe you'd get by with a grad student that's getting close to their degree. What you want to do is you want to put together the best team, and I'll emphasize team because a lot of times it's more than one individual on these projects. And when they look at the team, they say that's a darn good team. And if you can get the Nobel laureate, PhD, world-renowned expert as your PI, that's what you do. But the chances of knowing that person, getting them interested in your project, and getting them to work primarily for your company during the course of the phase one are somewhere between slim and none. So you do the best you can to get as close as you can to that. So if you can find, if the best you can put together is a student who would be agreeable to join your company as an employee, be primarily employed there upon award of this project, I guess you put them in, maybe you put them in as the PI. I think that's going to greatly hinder your project unless they've got really great non-academic experience or credentials or certifications or something like that that helps bolster their capabilities on paper. And a lot of this, guys, is on paper because the reviewers don't know us. They don't know who we are. You know, they just see our bios and they have to go in our bios. So they're really very much restricted to not picking people based on, boy, I know this guy, he is brilliant. I know he hasn't, got the academics, but he's a brilliant, and they don't know that. They just don't know it. It's got to go based on your bio, and so you put forward a team that looks as strong as you can on their bios.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments, I just have a couple here. One is, if you didn't receive the presentation on Friday and you signed up over the weekend, Tasha will be sharing the full deck with you as long as you're registered in our system sometime today. And Jim, I wanted to thank you so much.
Sure.
What a great, succinct webinar today that really provides everybody some real tools to be successful in SBIRSTTR. Looking forward to some of your afternoon one-on-ones today. And for those of you who might not have a one-on-one, but are interested and would like to talk with Jim, please let us know. We'll make sure that we connect you. Just like those that are scheduled today, it would be great if you provided a brief abstract, half a page summary on your technology, so we can coordinate some of those sessions with Jim, and he knows and has some background information on your projects. So with that, we'll go into a break here. And again, fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And
My
thank
pleasure.
you, Aisha, for running technology back there. And
Yes.
everyone, you have a nice holiday season, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks.